Hello, you're very welcome to the Overlap Rugby Podcast. I'm Shane, that's Daragh.
Hello.
Two brothers discussing all things rugby through the lens of Leinster and Ireland. And yeah, this is episode 108, and another good show in store for you. We are going to start, as we have been, with the Rugby Championship, because that is the news. The All Blacks crowned champions again a week in advance, emphatic stuff. We're going to start with that clash, looking back on the 100th test match between the Springboks and the All Blacks. Edged in the end in dramatic fashion. It was great to see. It was all the drama we wanted, and we're going to get into that one before we look ahead to this week's rematch when the All Blacks will be looking to secure the Grand Slam, which is on a very rare feat in the Rugby Championship and a very impressive one as well, given the nature of the games there. And we're going to start with that clash, and then we're going to move on to the Wallabies and the Pumas, who played last week. The Wallabies exerted their dominance, although they didn't manage to get their bonus point, which did vex them a little, but they were comfortably better than the Pumas in week one of their two-match series. We're going to look back on that and then look ahead to preview this week's game between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. The Rugby Championship wrapping up. We're heading towards the end of the year as far as Test rugby is concerned.
Yeah.
But the business end also arriving in the Rugby World Cup qualifiers. We're going to be looking ahead to two crunch matches. We have they're both two-legged affairs.
That's right.
But the US are taking on Uruguay and Canada take on Chile. Winner US-Uruguay straight into the World Cup.
Yeah.
Loser of that match plays the winner of Canada-Chile for the other automatic qualification spot.
Yeah.
And the loser of that game then goes into the repechage. So it's a huge weekend, a huge 2 weekends in the context of Tier 2 rugby. And yeah, we're going to be digging into both of those games going on this week as well. And we're also going to look back on the qualifiers in the women's game, which is an entirely dour affair if you're an Irish fan. Ireland failing to qualify for the World Cup and indeed the repechage tournament.
Yes.
Finishing third, losing out. But
Yeah.
Italy securing automatic qualification, thoroughly deserved. We're going to look back on their campaign, take a look at why it's gone so well for them in recent years. I love the style of play they're playing, and congratulations to Scotland as well, who managed to slip into that repechage tournament and will have a good chance of qualifying as well, so we'll dig into that match too.
Absolutely. And then from there we'll pivot into club rugby as well, which has all now resumed, certainly up in European spheres. We're going to start with the United Rugby Championship, which got underway for the first time ever last weekend, and we'll look back on those games. We'll also touch base with the Top 14, which has gone on, and the Premiership as well, which is now well underway with 2 weeks in the books and some interesting results in all of those games. And we're going to just wrap all of that up in European rugby, as well as the Rugby Europe Super Cup, which had its second weekend of fixtures completed and played as well. So it's also well underway, another fledgling young tournament, and we'll touch base on that as well in wrapping up all the club.
Exciting times, the game's growing all over, and we'll definitely be touching on that too. We're also going to just touch on the sevens that went on last weekend in Edmonton, the Blitzboks and GB. Women coming out on top in that one too, before wrapping up the show as we do with the rugby news of the week. But remember, if you do enjoy the show, if you do have any comments down that you want to give, be sure to leave them down below. Any critiques, any feedback, anything at all, just opinions on the world of rugby and the raft of stuff that we talk about, be sure to get into the comment section and comment. Liking the video helps a lot as well, and shares and all the good YouTube stuff.
Subscribe for those who haven't already. But
yes, indeed, we're just on that. We're going to be back again next week. Obviously, just boxing off the Rugby Championship. We're going to review that the weekend that was. We're going to look ahead to the second leg of those Crunch World Cup qualifiers as well, and then we're probably going to put the show on ice a little bit just until the end of October. Not too long, but just when the test window reopens, and then there's a few tasty November games to get into. I think we'll return.
That's right.
Probably we just need a few weeks off, but it falls quite nicely for us in that way. So we'll be back then in full anyway for the November internationals. But if you in case you're gonna miss when we go missing and then we come back, I think our videos can often get buried beneath the algorithm. The YouTube decides that we're done.
Sometimes,
and then so it's helpful if you subscribe, if you ring the bell. And then when we're back, you'll know instantly.
That's right. Yeah, no, be expecting ORP 109 next week, and then a couple of weeks break, and we'll be back towards the end of October with ORP 110, I guess. That's the kind of thing, and if you ring the bell, you'll get notified of when they come out.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I suppose without any more of that, any more ado at all, we will get ORP 108 underway, and we're going to start, as we have been doing, with the Rugby Championship, and we have reached now round 6, the conclusion, the rounding up of this year's tournament. And before we even kick off, before the whistle is blown in the opening of those fixtures, we know that the All Blacks are Rugby Championship champions for 2021 and still unbeaten in 2021 and going for a Grand Slam this weekend in 2021. And they look mighty impressive. It was the 100th test that delivered, I thought. There's been some critiques, but mainly that's because there was a bit of Springbok kind of pressure put on the All Blacks, and some of it was slow, but it was just great to see it come down to the absolute wire and be decided by those kinds of dramatic moments and those small margins. It's exactly what you want for in test match footy, and it kind of delivered on that.
Yeah, no question. I wouldn't. I think most of the critiques were just coming from disappointed Springbok fans. But no, it was a hell of a game. It was a hell of a tournament. Really enjoyed it. Really from the off. Obviously, it came off the back of that Lions tour, but the Bledisloe games were intriguing. Yeah. And to see Australia bounce back has been awesome. There's been two stories really in this tournament, and they're both on either side of the Tasman. Yeah. From a positive point of view, I mean, those Bledisloe games were great. I think the All Blacks have been just purring along absolutely brilliantly, gone right back to their roots. They're playing true All Black rugby at a tempo that is unrelenting and very, very difficult to deal with, as any side that's played them this year will testify, although as we'll get into, the Springboks had a lot of success there. And then the Wallabies just arriving back on the rugby scene, the Rennie project taking shape, depth emerging, talent galore emerging, some serious
style of play themselves, going to get bums on seats in Australia, which is a tough enough thing, but they're getting them there because 3 wins on the bounce. That's the first time since 2017 that they've managed that, and it's just a testament to how this team plays a bit of really top quality rugby.
Polished all over, well coached, great skill set, hungry, getting really good on defence as well as offence. Just if they can learn to be that little bit more clinical, which they were at times in those great matches against the Springboks. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for any Tier 1 side, and looking forward to seeing them tour Europe this November as well and go away from home. Obviously the Boks have shown that sometimes when you're camped at home it can be difficult once you get up and leave, but that'll be the next challenge for them. But no, it's been an awesome tournament and thoroughly enjoyable, and I think
the kind of table will reflect that. It's currently reflecting it as New Zealand sit top with 24 points at the minute, Australia in second with, is it 13 or 14 that they have?
They've got so Australia have 13 currently, and then the Springboks behind them have 11.
So 2 points clear with a game in hand, or
a win against the Pumas secures second place for them, and they're well worth it. I mean, they beat the Boks twice.
There've been 2 teams with positive spins from this tournament and 2 teams with head scratching frustrations from this tournament, and I think
one more than the other.
One more so than the other by far. No, let's not. I'm not splitting. We'll get into the nitty gritty of that when we're discussing these 4 teams. But definitely those 2 trans-Tasman teams have been dominating this tournament in 2021. And look, we still have one more round to go, but we're going to start by looking back on that 100th test, an historic test that we played out last weekend at Queensland Country Bank Stadium, the location for it. And just what a game this was. It was in the end the All Blacks 19, the Springboks 17, and we're all going to remember the Geordie Barrett etching his name into the history books for New Zealand fans in years to come, kicking that winning goal, and capping off actually a stellar performance all round. He commanded the air, which he had to with his height and his presence and his catching, and he ran very dangerously, but then sealed it. He had kicked well all day, but kicking that clutch one down at the wire, that's kind of what it's all about.
I mean, I thought it's as good a place to start as any is Geordie Barrett's form, because I've quietly been I'm certainly a respecter of Geordie's game and understanding what he's capable of. But I've been of the romantic mindset in recent times that the All Blacks should double down and be themselves and go Mo'unga with maybe Mackenzie or Beauden Barrett at 15, and then the other to come on and just go all out offense. And I've been like, oh come on, Fozzie Bear, let's go all out. But when you got Geordie in there, just bringing the mood down, being all secure, and Fozzie Bear's going the virtue of security there. Why? That's why. Because he can win us test matches that are tight when the Springboks get on top of us. I mean. That was huge clutch play from him, and he was full of them all day long. His aerial game was superb. His boot was dialed in, and by the end of the game his was the best boot on the pitch despite all those Springbok successes. But I mean, the tale of this match from an All Black point of view is it's kind of that old school thing of how can they have everything go wrong for them and still win a test match?
Yeah.
And the answer is because they continue to hustle. I mean, their defense, they play this heads up rugby, not just on offense but on defense. And slowly as the game went on, they got more and more down to grips with what the Boks were doing. The tries didn't come. They were destroyed really on the line, as you'd say, in and around the breakdown.
True.
They had huge issues. They were really struggling to get anything going on offense, but whenever they got a sniff, and Quinn Tupaia just with that excellent turnover towards the death, they were able to make it count on the scoreboard. They're never ever out of a game.
No, and that's just their greatest quality as a team, isn't it? And conversely, from the Springbok point of view, then you're going like, how can you paint your winning picture, as we put it, and as we did say last week in our description of how they win the game? They managed to do 9 out of 10 things on it. They did all the things they would have wanted. They wrestled control of the tempo. They were a mess at the breakdown. Turnovers galore for them at the breakdown all day.
Yeah.
Their scrum got on top. They managed to disrupt the All Black line out, causing them severe headaches and a kind of an inability to get started, and guys like Havili looking thoroughly impotent compared to Dale Linde, who looked awesome throughout.
Yeah, and we should talk about Linde as well, just because I've been harsh on him over the last 2 weeks. He was given a really tough time of it by Samu Karevi.
He was.
Karevi was dominating him in and around the gain line, just winning every contact, both sides of the ball, explosive, and Dale Linde was struggling to handle him. Yeah. It was the inverse this week. I mean, David Havili has had a flawless run at 12 since he started there for the Crusaders this year. He's just got better and better and better, and you were wondering where his ceiling is. Well, this is the first backward step he's taken, because he was defeated at the line by Dale Linde constantly. Dale Linde was in his face. They never got any front foot ball in that channel. Whenever the two of them were actually opposite each other, 12 on 12, Dale Linde was winning that contact, driving them back. And it completely stymied that offense. It was everything you would have hoped for from the Springbok point of view. There were dominant tackles, there was excellent counter-rucking, and they smothered the All Blacks. And you're right to point out the line-out as well, because that happened. Like, the first half, the All Black line-out was pretty secure, and they were still causing problems, and obviously they had the early try. Around the beginning of the second half, Lou Diager started to really get on top of them.
Get the read on. Just getting his hands on them and upsetting it. And then they started jumping to 2, which meant the passing of TJ was tested, and then his passing wasn't quite as wide.
Towards the tail end of the game, because they were forcing it. They were throwing to 2 because they knew they had to, because they were under pressure, and then they were still trying to go wide, still trying to get it first phase to the outside centre channel, and every single time it was being swallowed up. And it was really concerning from the All Blacks that they didn't make that adjustment, and you need to actually work when you're going to 2. You need to work for a phase or 2 before you can get to that edge, especially against a defence like the Springboks.
That's true. And he's sitting down on the inside. Fair play to Quagga Smith. He did a much better job in that particular role as well, of just locking down that particular space they want to sit them down in. Just the hustle of them at the breakdown. They comprehensively won the back row battle by dominating the breakdown, so as they did, and with a few exceptions, Tupaia getting his hands in for that good steal, but predominantly the Boks had all the turnover ball they could ever need to do anything they wanted with, because they were actually that combative in the contact zone. And yet, as is their worst quality, they didn't manage to make that count on the scoreboard. And you look at in the opening stanza of the game, where the Will Jordan try came from, it came on the 3rd minute, but that whole 3 minutes the ball had been in play, and it had changed hands a few times, and it was open, and it was in the middle third that it was just I think a Cole's swivel, was it? It was
Cody Taylor.
Cody Taylor, sorry, similar gate in the open field, but another roaming hooker breaking through the line and finding a link man, and it's Will Jordan try, and that's the All Black picture to a T. 3 minutes of open footy followed by an All Black try, perfect. But from then on, the Boks managed to control pretty much the majority of the game. They were the ones setting the tempo. They were able to get on top of the set piece. They were able to get some mauls going. They were looking pretty good.
George Bridge in the aerial
game. A bizarre drop for under very little pressure from a pretty loose faff kick, and then suddenly that's a try. And it was just
a few bad plays he had.
It was not, considering he was cited, that was the reasoning that cited behind selecting him and dropping Reese. It did not pay dividends in that regard, whereas Geordie was more secure back there, and they did from that point on they did manage to diffuse. It was your standard one chaos kick try that the Boks will account for, and it's part of their winning conditions. They managed to tick, as we were saying, nearly 9 out of 10 boxes were going the Boks way, and yet on the scoreboard at the end they couldn't get it.
They weren't able to force a defensive try. The All Blacks still managed to mind the ball well in that sense. They didn't throw them any loose offloads, but they did struggle at the breakdown. But the Boks, they struggle to put tries on the board. They kick just about everything, and really they're limiting their tries at the moment to maul tries, which the All Blacks will always be game for stopping. They didn't have too many opportunities probably because it was such a tight test match that you're kicking everything. You're kicking everything that's within range. So they never got to set up their 5 meter maul, and their multi-phase / counter-attacking tries are just not really there. If it's anything other than like 90-10, we're going to get our winger in space here, they're just going to kick it. They'll default to their defense, and hence they're not putting the required points on the board. Now the game plan is working, and they did manage to own much of this game. They couldn't force that defensive try, and then towards the tail end I think they tired a little as well. Some of those kicks, particularly in that last 10 minutes, they had a couple of kicks that were just poor, that were loose, including the one that led up to the Tupaya steal, and then all of a sudden, because their kicks were so loose, they were creating these long sequences in which their big guys tired. Franco Mostert, I mean, we talked about his loose form a little bit in the context of him playing at 7 out of position, and kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt, but he had a rough show off the bench in position, and one of those, obviously 2 clangers in particular, the drop that ended the game, and then the missed clean out on Tupaya is the one, like, he looks tired, and
he's still wearing 19 on his back instead of a starter's job,
and
he's getting tired there and not hitting the ruck,
and your man,
he's a lock on a 13, he should be moving him,
exactly. And Tupaya's in decent position, but it's obviously the angles on the far side. He's on the far side of the ruck, but it looks like he's trying to wrestle with an arm, but he's just not putting enough energy into it. I mean, if he can just, like, he should give himself a lineup and put energy into the hit, and that'll probably be enough, because he's such a unit, but he was just not at it, and hence ended up giving away a clanger of a penalty, which of course Geordie treated it like it was just a penalty right under the sticks. It didn't make any difference how far out it was.
He strikes a very good dead ball to Geordie Barrett, but a few other kind of excellent moments from the All Blacks. It's great to see Will Jordan back scoring a lovely try to start things off, but ultimately being able to nick a tight one, which they haven't been under this kind of duress. And there were a few moments Brodie Retallick got a little loose and gave them 6 points through a bit of sloppiness early.
They couldn't get in before half time, which we felt was huge.
That was another big little win for the Springboks. They were the first team this year to prevent the All Blacks from scoring.
I mean, it's what made it the tight game that it was. I mean, the All Blacks, I remember citing it at the time, I was sceptical the whole way through, up until I was saying, like, from about 32 to 47, that's when they take these games away from you, generally speaking. And once they got to that, like, 47th minute into the 50th and 60th, you're like, well, this is a game. They're not going to, like, they've passed their witching hour for try scoring, and now it's going to be very, very interesting. And it was, but the All Blacks, to their credit, managed to just dig out the play, managed to make a play. Somebody out there, just in their constant hustle, managed to make a play. Apart from
the little things getting right as opposed to getting wrong. They trusted Tupaya on the bench as cover. He comes in, he delivers. Elton Yankees doesn't feature, and Pollard does 80 minutes, and including a few loose kicks towards the end. These were the kinds of mistakes they weren't making in 2019 in the World Cup, where they were flawless as far as all of that, and a little bit more kind of shaky ground for the world champs in this one.
Did have some good bench impact though. Van Staden with all of his jackal steals, like he was just an absolute nightmare for the All Blacks to deal with.
The forwards, it would have been nice if Visa was available and they gone Van Staden Visa and just had more to throw in towards the death. But
Mostert not delivering is the other
flip side of that as well. But the front row union did deliver as well. They got a few good scrum penalties in the second half, and they were able to put the squeeze on the All Blacks there. So and a lot of encouraging stuff from the Springboks, but ultimately an annoying and frustrating defeat, and that's 3 in a row now for them, which is very unusual for them, and gonna sting, I'm sure. I was just going to cite, because it did amuse me, there was TAS Analytics, another YouTube channel, did put up a video of a very well edited video of the last 6 minutes of playtime from this one, and titled it "The Dumbest 6 Minutes in Springbok History" or something quite sharp, which was kind of highlight. I think it was set to Queens under pressure and no time, which was the crux of the video. Under pressure while they have the ball and holding on to a lead, and then just as they blow it, it's no time and they're kicking the ball away. And it's like a little harsh, but there's definitely a truth in it. Like, some of the he was highlighting some of the overlaps that they had and potential to attack space, but it's kind of, you're probably not going to get that from this Bok team, and we've seen that. Like, that's like maybe a little harsh aspect, but one of your true things that you were saying is just a lot of the kicks were poor. They were lazy, like sitting deep and just huffing it long when you need a score. That's really not on. And
it's not even when you need a score, like when they were in the lead as well. I think particularly, I think it was Pollard stroked the one to lead to that Tupaya steal. I can't remember who was on the receiving end of it, whether it was Mackenzie or someone else, but they linked up with Tupaya anyway. It might have even been Bridge, but no, in that scenario they should have been looking for a bit more accuracy and even a bit more deception. I mean, Pollard and Faf are supposed to be the brains of this team.
And it was a little dense.
Yeah,
by the end.
exactly.
Probably fatigue based, but sometimes they're just chipping it away kind of reflexively.
There's nothing wrong with backing the defence, but just add a little bit of subtlety to it, a little bit of a little bit of intuition or ingenuity. Just maybe one or two plays here and there, get the All Black line set. Maybe on the edge of a pullback, you drop it onto the toe. You should be firing sort of deep enough balls, but also just out of the way of the wingers, finding grass, going deep, finding the corner if you can. If it's not
50-22, that would have iced the game.
Ideally, yeah, exactly. Just trust your boot to be a little better than just to chip the ball down the other end. You need to be finding grass with it. And if you can find a good one, then you have them pinned back, and you probably have the winnings of the game.
They could have set up that offensive ball if they could dial that. For all the kicking that they didn't dial in the 50-22 aggressive kick, and that would have been nice to see. But yeah, I think a couple of truths from it is that like they're missing Colby. And they are going to miss him again this week. We'll get into this this week's game in a couple of minutes now. But they're definitely missing that Cheslin Colby spark in a game like this that can flip it for them as well. Another chaos factor that if you just get him a bouncing ball, he can be the offensive spark that they sometimes are lacking for or wanting for. And Villy knows that if he feeds them the ball, even in a minute bit of space, something great can happen. So they're just more inclined to get it to him than when he's out there. But also, there's no doubt that they are just a blunter. Even when Colby was in there during the Lions tour, they've been a blunter force in 2021 than they were when they won the World Cup in 2019. They were a bit more. There was more balance to them in 2019, including the 6-2 split and the trust they had in the bench men, including just some of the strike plays off line out to try and get their wingers in space. Mapimpi and Colby were both finding the ball a bit more often than they are finding in this 2021 iteration, where they're kicking a little bit more and a little bit looser, and there's just no question that Pollard and Faf in particular, who are the shepherds of this team, are not in as sparkling form as they were in that World Cup year either.
Nope. I would say the best form of the brains unit is actually Villy LaRue's. Yeah, he's been pretty flawless.
Yeah, which was the inverse of what we're saying in the World Cup throughout that. But I think that's part of the truth in it, is just they're not quite playing to the standard that they were, and that's a frustration for them. And the standard's very high in the Rugby Championship.
Indeed, and listen, they did get a lot right in this game. They were excellent in moments. They were ferocious. They stymied this All Black offense,
which was take some doing.
It was a bloody impressive showing for 78 odd minutes, and it could have gone the other way. But yeah, this is the problem for the Boks at the moment, is that an excellent performance by them against a stuttering performance by the All Blacks leads to too close a game.
And still only 17 points up
whereas
there, which is
the inverse. I mean, I'm not saying we will see the inverse this week, but if we do, I promise you that the Springboks won't be within a prayer of winning the game.
Much less a score.
Indeed, but we will pivot on to that game now. Obviously a huge game this weekend, the 101st test between the Springboks and the All Blacks, Rugby Championship round 6. While the championship may be wrapped up, this does feel like a big game for both sides. This is in Robina Stadium, or the Cebus Super Stadium, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, it seems to have two names there. This is on Saturday evening local time at 8 p.m. and 11 a.m. in UK and Irish time, morning kickoff for us. It's going to be the very last game of the championship. It's going to be refereed by Matthew Carley, who took the Oz game last weekend, and then Damon Murphy and Jordan Ray on the sidelines, with Brett Cronin in the TMO, all Aussies. I mean, this one, obviously from a Springbok point of view, this is to avoid 4 consecutive defeats.
Indeed, which is absolutely not good in their books at all. World champions is a little bit of egg on face if you go.
No, I mean, listen, if
a Rugby Championship, 2 and 4.
2 and 4 is a rough record as well. But I mean, if they go 4 defeats in a row, they would be. What would they be on the season? They had the win against Georgia, and South Africa A match was not capped, so they would just be 3 and 1 and 3 and 4, 5 and 4 on the season.
5 and 4. It's not a great season. Really.
Close to that 500 rating. I mean, it definitely feels like they could arrest some of the negativity that's creeping around the squad with a big win here, and I think they'll know that they're well capable of doing it.
Yeah, well, they'll be encouraged by their showing last week for lots of it, as we were saying just then. They really did manage to get a lot of what they want to do right, but it's making a count on the scoreboard for them that's going to be the biggest task. And for the All Blacks, the flip side is, can they go go the whole hog and manage a Grand Slam. They are unbeaten as it stands in 2021. It's been a perfect year for them, and if they manage this, then a rugby championship Grand Slam, which is just 6 tremendously difficult games. Very, very difficult task.
It doesn't get talked about enough. I remember I read a couple of pieces on this in the week, just talking about why don't Sanzar bill it as such? I mean, the Grand Slam in the Six Nations is such a tremendous big deal. A Grand Slam decider is a huge thing, and teams that win Grand Slams go down in history.
True.
I mean, the All Blacks, if they are winning a Grand Slam in this, 6 consecutive wins against 3 of the top sides in World Rugby. It is a tougher task, no question, than doing it in the Six Nations. It's an incredible achievement. And yet I know the All Blacks have done it in the last decade, probably a few times, but I can't think off the top of my head how many times they've done it, because it just doesn't get noticed. It's not as you win the Rugby Championship or you don't. They don't even take note of Grand Slams, despite how uniquely awesome an achievement.
It's a very difficult thing, and even more so if some team other than the All Blacks does it, because that's never going to happen.
That's never going to happen. But
it's impressive for the All Blacks too, and they will be shooting for it this week, and they'll be confident because they know they got a lot wrong last week. Conversely, and they'll be looking to correct a few things that are correctable.
It's a great place to be in, isn't it? When you've got things to work on and you've got areas to improve on, and yet you're coming off the win. You've still got that inner belief. You've got none of that confidence really dented, and yet you still know that there are areas you need to improve on.
You were not sharp in all
place
areas.
To be.
100%. No one's disputing that the All Blacks are in a great place right now, as they're already champions going into it. So just the current record, we had it. We listed it last week, but now I think they have. Of the 100 games played now, it's 60-36 with 4 draws. So that was the All Blacks' 60th win over the Springboks last week, and they'll be shooting for 61 now.
Very good, very good. Yeah, very, very impressive stuff from the All Blacks last week, but impressive again from the Springboks. We do have the 2 squads for this game.
We do.
Announced
being named
as a blessing as it is. And we're gonna start with the home side, the allegedly home side, which is the Springboks.
Yes.
They have a couple of interesting things. They've moved Trevor Nyakanye from loosehead to tight and brought Oxen Che back in.
He's there with Mbanambi in the front row. It's one of their weaker combinations.
It is. I don't know about statistics, but my eyes are telling me this year, Oxenche, Bongi Mbanambi, Trevor Nyakanye is what they've gone for as a front row unit. That to me is their weakest scrummaging unit. I think Nyakanye is a much better loose head scrummager than a tight head scrummager, and I think Oxenche is their weakest scrummager, full stop, by far in the whole squad. I mean, he's been turned inside and out a few times this year. I don't.
They'll be hoping to kind of lock that down. I think the motivation behind their front row selection all year, and it goes back to the Georgia game when they first sprung this
is to do the bench thing.
Marks kits off, cock off the bench, and to be fair, it worked wonders last week. They were demolishing scrums in that second half, and it was very, very powerful off the bench. So I think they're looking for similar impact, but they will be hoping that certainly Nyakanye can lock down from tight.
It's just less likely. It's less likely that I think that part of the reason they did so well last week was that they got on top of the scrum, and Oxenche and Trevor Nyakanye, Joe Moody and Nepo Lalala isn't the strongest combination from the All Blacks, but I'd be surprised now to see the Boks get on top of them with that combination. Hopefully I get proved wrong. They obviously have a lot of faith in Oxenche, and he's dynamic in the loose. For a Springbok loosehead, he's not doing enough at the scrum time for me at the moment. But they do have Etzebeth and Diager, they're 2 stalwarts sitting in at lock.
Team, actually,
Sia, Khaleesi, Quagga Smith, Dwayne Vermeulen in the back row, no changes there. Faf and Pollard, trusted.
They likewise.
Yeah, they trust their guys to get it done. And Mapimpi, Nkosi and Vili LaRue make up the back 3 in the absence of Colby.
That's right. Then on the bench, as we said, Marks, Kitsoff and Koch are in there covering the front row. Mostert is covering the lock. Visa is in this week because Van Staden was forced out due to injury. A shame because he was awesome, marauding off the bench last week. But Visa has been playing very well, and he was frozen out last week because of a hearing issue and all this. He wasn't being able to clear it in time to be named, so he comes back in. And then it's the 5-3 split again. We have 2 Yankeeses, Herschel and Elton on the bench with France Stain. So a very similar team to what played last week.
Yeah, and that backline bench is imperfect again. We'll hope to see improvements in terms of their use of it.
I wonder if we will use Elton at all. I mean, maybe if the game's already over and they're 2 scores down, they'll throw Elton in. But
and for based on last
week's showing with Pollard doing pretty much the full 80, I think.
Personally, I mean, I know Willemsen missed that 1 kick, but him and Reinach, for me, it's a mystery why they haven't been involved in these 2 games. And think there's a decent case to be made that Reinach has been the best 9 in the test team this year.
Yeah.
And Willemse has been really, really impactful off the bench in every single game, so it seems weird to me that they're not going to use him.
Yeah.
And by contrast, the All Blacks have brought in Richie Mo'unga. Just to look at their team, they've got Moody, Taylor and Leolala in the front row, as we mentioned. Retallick and Scott Barrett still in at the locks. Kirioani, Artie Sevilla and Luke Jacobson still trusted with that back row job.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Jacobson didn't make kick-off last week, though. Obviously he was forced out.
Yes,
Blackadder came in, so hopefully this time we will see him there.
And Blackadder, explosive impact off the bench himself, and he will come in like he's been one of the players of the season this year.
One of the finds of the season in an already decent back row.
And Brad Weber is trusted at 9. Obviously they had some issues with ruck clearance, getting him in for the quick passing.
Yeah.
Hopefully clearing.
He's more of an Aaron Smith substitute than TJ. TJ is kind of fast becoming just that bench man for them. He definitely changes. He adds extra kgs from a 9 point of view. He can get breakdown steals when the game gets broken up. He can make running plays and all kinds of things in the last quarter, but he's not quite giving them the service they need as far as his passing game, just the crispness of it from the beginning.
And when the Buck defence is at its hungriest and most energetic, you need every little inch that you can get. And they're hoping that Brad Weber can give them that from 9. Obviously Aaron Smith, just a huge loss.
He'll be kitting out in domestic footy, as he was showing. He's tweeting he's playing still at home.
Glad to see that Anton Leonard-Brown, well, rather than that they've made some changes at centre, make some adjustments. But they have kept faith with Havili. I think Havili is their future at 12. I think he's got learning to do at this level. And so to have him line out again.
He lost last week, and as they say, it doesn't mean you have to like it. You can go out and try and get one up this time. And if they manage to get a few more things right, ruck clearance, guys like Jacobson coming in to make an impact like that, and then guys like Weber clearing rucks, then you could find Havili with front football and a bit of space could do more damage than he did last week.
For sure, and he's got a new partner this week in Leonard-Brown. They've shaken up their team a little bit to new wingers. They've gone with Rico and Sever Reese. Will Jordan rested for this week, and then Jordy Barrett still retaining his position at fullback. Rico and a bit more space on the wing, and a hungry Sever Reese coming in definitely adds something to the squad, and their bench has a bit of impact too. I mean, in Sofo Aumua, George Bauer and Ofatung Afasi, they actually have a bench front row that's set to make an impact that could be comparable. Certainly they're going to be confident in those guys to come on and take on
go
what the Boks are offering.
With all of those
Aumua is going to be explosive off the bench in the loose, and Bauer and Tuang Afasi are probably their best scrummagers in their respective position. So that is a decent bit of impact.
That's probably a response to what the Boks are doing in terms of what happened last week. They're making some adjustments, and you can see that in their selection. Tui Pilatu covering lock is another big hefty yoke to be chucking in. Good impact. Ethan Blackadder, as you said, good enough for the number 20 jersey. And then on the bench in the back line you have TJ Perenara, Richie Mo'unga and Damien McKenzie. That is serious dynamism.
Biggest point of discrepancy between the two sides is the back substitutes.
3 back substitutes each. And how much they're each are trusted. We saw Quinn Tupaia last week with that great game-winning steal for them. He's now out this week in favour of guys like Richie Mo'unga, who they also have faith in, and he will come in and feature. Like, they will use those guys on the bench. It's a horses for courses case, because both of these sides have ridiculous depth. As we were billing last week, it's like two apex predators in their respective styles. You have the bludgeoning Springboks and the free-flowing All Blacks, and that kind of clash meets here, but you never get as high a quality game of rugby as when these two guys meet, or these two teams meet. It's just going to be awesome. Yeah,
absolutely. To look at the game from the point of view of the two sides, obviously we're going to start with the allegedly home team, which is the Springboks. And obviously they're a little bit rocked and reeling after that. They were really stung by that. I know there were a few Springbok fans who were absolutely gutted the morning of, because they felt, I mean, they should have won the game. They dominated
to winning a game of rugby and not quite getting there. It's always frustrating.
It is, and then they did mismanage the dying moments of the game.
They did,
but there's definitely points of encouragement. I think certainly if Lou Diager can hold his fitness, he's struggled at times to go 80 minutes, Lou Diager. But his work at the line out was game changing. That needs to be an area that they're hungry, that they're attacking
from minute one.
And their defense needs to eat the All Blacks alive, and it's all about sort of their physicality is there, so bringing that energy is really important, and they know to expect a form of an All Black All Black clash.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same thing as if they actually beat them, but the All Blacks will come back hungrier.
Well,
There's
they're
a few
still
changes
shooting
in
for
there.
that Grand Slam. There's plenty of motivation there for both teams, to be fair.
They just know they can be better, and they're going to be a little bit more explosive, and the Boks are going to have to meet that again with physicality and speed on defence.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the more concerning shots. I mean, the wide shot of that Will Jordan try at the beginning, and this was after 2.5 minutes of open play.
Yeah.
But after Cody Taylor cuts the line, and first of all, like a pass goes miles to deck. He scoops back, runs back and scoops it up, and then he does beat about 3 or 4 players before he's gone through the line, and it's pretty ugly from a Springbok point of view after 2.5 minutes that their players are all kind of flailing, and then the broadcast cuts to a wide shot from deep, and you can just see Will Jordan hair past everyone on that Springboks team to run that tracking line, and that speed differential is real, and especially after a couple of minutes of ball and play time, it's scary. So I mean, they do slow down. They need to get the ball out, and they did a great job from that moment on of arresting that. Guys went down. You have Etzebeth goes down. That we've seen a lot was made of Razzie Erasmus, but I keep noticing that physio that they keep having, because she's always on. She's always popping onto the pitch, rubbing one of the lads or giving some padding or something. It's like every break and play they're down, and and Foster was asked about as well. He's like, I'm sure it's a tactic, but it's one that they have to expect in the All Blacks. But it's definitely, from a Bok point of view, you gotta do it. It's unequivocally there. The speed difference is there already in terms of the back lines and how they stack up. So if you couple that with the fact that if you go an extra few minutes in this Australian air, then you start puffing and blowing and getting a little raggedy. They need to manage to arrest control of the tempo of the game, and it starts really at set piece and breakdown. You're right to highlight Daragh stealing their ball from source. If you can upset the All Blacks from source, it goes a long way to upsetting their whole rhythm, and they end up changing their tactics at set piece, and then they're a little narrower and it's tougher and it's easier to defend if you're a Springbok. But also the breakdown, that was the big point of difference. The startling frequency with which they were able to generate those turnovers, particularly in the second half, they should have been doing a lot more with them. Indeed, and the All Blacks kind of leave it there for them. They try and run tracking lines, and if you can hunt them down and stop them before they break the line, there is a moment to go for the ball, and they're all game for that.
They are. They're all physical enough to execute it. Even Faf and Pollard will grab one if it's there. Like they can both. They were bossing that breakdown battle last week.
And if it starts in the centre, I mean, that's the key. If they can stop the All Blacks from having any capacity to sit them down in the midfield on multi-phase, the All Blacks probably will try and go wide before they do anything else, and that's where the Boks can go eat. Like, there was one very interesting play towards the tail end of the half, obviously the one that Nkosi puts his hand out and blocks the ball and gets himself carded, and it's a negative play, and you think just before half time, geez, they could really be made to pay for that, and they do a great job of preventing that from happening and keeping in the game by not conceding a try during that period. But like, it's actually an interesting example of what the potential of the Bok defense is and how the defensive tries can come about, because the All Blacks did a lot of sort of loud work in the midfield in that play, and Am ended up having more or less 3 players covered in one moment. And he's also flying out of the line. And if Nkosi could have just read the play a little bit better, and come out and got into the passing lane, the All Blacks were actually going to be in a pretty uncomfortable position. Bowden Barrett was going to have maybe no one to work with, or try like a miracle basketball pass,
take a contact from Am who's up in his face.
Indeed, and that's kind of the potential of the Bok defense. And you saw it play out in 2018. But just if they can sort of if Nkosi can follow Am's lead, and the wide winger read the play a little bit better when they're flying up and get into those passing lanes, and maybe forcing out of an off balance, off kilter All Black team to make a poor play, that is there could be a pick there for them, and that's definitely the picture for them. Shutting down the midfield forces the All Blacks to gamble a little bit more.
And that's they do. They tend to try and pull that trigger because they want to play ball out wide. So there's definitely scope for it. It does mean Nkosi probably holding it a little bit wider in terms of his alignment, but then as you say, shooting up into the passing lane with a bit more time and space rather than coming in on the tackle.
He ended up in that particular play. He ended up shooting on a guy who Am had. And that was a mistake. Am actually had the midfield sorted. And Nkosi just needed to get into the passing lane on the outside and force something goofy out of an under pressure Barrett, who might try like an ill-advised grubber but realise before long he doesn't have the time because Am's in his face,
something
or
like
try a loopy pass but realise he doesn't have the time because Am's in his face, or take a contact because Am is in his face.
Yes.
And like that's like Am obviously is the king of that defence and the leader of it, but if
De Linde was putting his hand up last week
De
as
Linde
well.
can make Am shine, and Am can become irrelevant if De Linde doesn't function, because De Linde, the whole genius of Am works when you can shut down the inside of the midfield and then pull all kinds of trickery to stop teams from getting outside you.
Yeah,
like the Wallabies didn't become a factor because Karevi was just doing so much on the line. Like Am couldn't control the game because Karevi was just all
sitting
over
down on the inside.
and Valentini and these guys, and that
like
obviously
Mustard
can't
out
happen.
of position did not work, and they've not gone back to it. Quagga did a much better job of tidying up that inside line to allow De Linde to just be that rock, and he was all up in like pressuring Havili and trying to get on top of him like they did last week will go a long way to making this contest very competitive and kind of making the All Blacks doubt themselves. And then, as you say, defensive tries, turnover tries, a good source of Springbok scores. And besides that, I don't think we will see too much deviation. Much as people were decrying the Springbok way of playing the game, we will still see the Springboks playing the game, or attempting to play the game their way for the most part. They will kick to contest, they will kick to smash you when you manage to retrieve the ball, they will rain down bombs with the hope of creating kind of chaotic opportunities. They'll also shoot up in the line and try and create defensive turnover ones. They'll be a hound at the breakdown, they will be a nightmare at the scrum if they can at all, and they will try and get their maul going. We know all of this is what to expect from them, but their question marks are a little bit more macro than that. It's like, is that enough? We did lots of that last week. Is there a case for them, kind of as Eddie O'Sullivan's put it before when criticising Ireland actually in the last few years, is there a case of playing so much rugby and kind of dictating so much in terms of the game, but just never backing yourselves and pulling the trigger, never having a strike move or two off the midfield or off a midfield line out that they can maybe go to? And they did try a few of them against the Wallabies and they just weren't slick enough to execute.
That's kind of my thought, is that, you know, honestly, watching them like that, what's interesting this week is that the criticism of the Bok game plan has not come from outside, it's come from inside South Africa.
Most part. Well, actually, John Kerwin was whinging about
it. But I mean, a lot of the criticism this week has come from frustrated South African fans just thinking maybe this isn't the way to win anymore. And it's a broader conversation I think we'll have next week in more depth when we have the full context of the championship to look back on. But I do think that, you know, I don't actually necessarily think that the problem was not taking shots when they were there.
It was not executing.
Yeah, I mean, I think like they tried to move the ball at times over the course of the last number of weeks, and
including last week
hasn't been great. I mean, really, the problem from an offensive point of view is the kind of the inevitability of that Mustard drop at the end of the game, and it's not that it was inevitable that Mustard was going to drop it; it was just inevitable that somebody was going to drop it. That something was going to go wrong, and it's really between all of them at the moment. There's no Am and De Linde don't work off one another. The general skill and, you know, the quality of pass, the quality of catch, the quality of line hitting,
shape,
it's not really there, and it's not really what they're doing. And you know, you can point to that as a macro problem. I don't think it's something that they're going to adjust in a week ahead of playing the All Blacks. I think there's a legitimate concern that they're not making pressure turn into points a little more, and I think there are realistic ways you can answer that question. How does the Springbok team get tries? Defense, bomb kicks and mauls.
We saw one of those last week. The bomb.
We saw the bomb. We didn't see them a maul. We didn't see them try a maul. Maybe there's a case
maybe
for,
you have to kick the corner.
You have to kick the corner.
Times.
Exactly right. You know, maybe backing the defense to the point where you're thinking you're going to win the game with threes is just a little naive against a team like the All Blacks, especially on
a
this
track like this. In Queensland or in the Gold Coast or at Seabus Super Stadium as we are this week. It's all going to be dry. It's all going to be.
They're going to be better than they were last week. This week, maybe this is the week to kick the corners. Maybe they're going to need to take a few more risks on defense and really try and go for those turnover tries and those defensive pressure tries. That's kind of a more likely adjustment in terms of adding points to the board than the idea of them, you know, taking a midfield line out and striking off the top of it and going for multi-phase and playing the All Black defense into the game against their pretty clunky offense.
And the All Black, as we've been saying as well, like for all that we do blow big up the Springbok defense because it is revolutionary, and over the last few years it's been kind of a phenomenon in terms of how well they've been able to smother teams out, and even last week they kept the All Blacks down in terms of the amount of tries they've been scoring. But it's not all defense, and like the All Black defense themselves have been very, very impressive. I don't know if I just don't think the Springboks have the skill set, the prerequisite skill set it will take to unpick them in that kind of style of game. So what you will see is
they're not going to win a shootout.
No, they're not. They're not in Australia. No, they're going to have to do something similar to what they did last week, as we've been saying. Control that tempo, be devils in the contact and in the breakdown and in the set piece. Try and upset all of that rhythm. Try and frustrate those Wallaby fans and All Black fans who are in the crowd, hoping for running open footy. Deny them all of that. Try and make it a set piece to a penalty to set piece kind of game. And as you say, maybe back yourself one or two more times. Maybe their version of pulling the trigger is going to that corner. And another source of it is, if there's going to be kicking duels, as there were at the beginning of as there was at the beginning of the game, that ultimately led to Will Jordan's try. If they can flip that on his head and manage to catch them off, it
also led to the Nkosi try.
It did. This is it. But if you can dial in a 50-22, I feel like we haven't seen a lot of them in the Rugby Championship. I think the Six Nations, we will see much more of it. More teams, more game to go for them than we have so far.
Depending on what adjustments defenses make between now and then.
This is all true, but I think of all the teams in this Rugby Championship, it's the Springboks are the ones that you would be thinking should be dialing in that as an attacking weapon. I think it would be a huge resource for them, given the strength of their maul and their line-out drive and the confidence in it. So if they're going to engage in that kind of kicking game, which they are, maybe try and dial in the kick for grass, kick for 50-22's approach, as opposed to just, as you were highlighting, like some of those fatigue-laden kicks that are just
those are the ones.
away.
I don't mind. They do kick to contest a lot. It's a try generator for them. I don't mind them so much as I mind the chips, the little chips off turnover a lot of the time. Just
brainless.
They're
just
a little lazy.
Kicks.
At times they can be great. Like Faf has a great. We've just turned over the ball from a box kick. Their wingers up. We've got to kick this instantly and find a corner.
Or his
that's
little
fine.
Rubber in for arms try in the Wallaby test. Little clever kicks like that, heads up footy.
But a lot of the time he just picks it up and leathers it and doesn't look where the space is and gives the ball away. And there's only so many times you get away with doing that. So definitely kick better is just, regardless of whether it's 50-22s, but just taking those little chip kicks out of the game and just kicking better and kicking with a little more deception, just adding a second option, a second dimension, maybe a Delindi carry before you kick to sit down the defence and give your out half a little more room.
Kicking front foot ball much better than kicking slow nothing ball, because the All Blacks will turn that into like a sparkling counter attack very quickly, as they did see. They were warned. There was a warning shot in the beginning that it was a 7-point lead that ultimately they had lost the game by 2. That's not the game they need to play.
No, indeed. And listen, that all of the tactical adjustments in the world won't matter a jolt if they don't bring the energy levels and the physicality that they brought last week, because they'll need that in spades, because the All Blacks will be coming at them with all guns blazing.
It's true.
This is going to be a better version of this great All Black team that they play this week, and it's from their point of view, it's an exciting challenge, isn't it?
It is. It's a massive challenge, and I think there'll be a few. It's a matter of adjustments for them. They won't be throwing the playbook at all. Sure, as we said, they have a load of work-ons, and yet they won last week. They're going for a Grand Slam. They're in a great position where they've already secured the tournament with a week left to play, so they're happy out. But in terms of this contest now, and in terms of facing this Springboks, and if you're going to get it done, like the Grand Slam is a tough thing to do, and you have a Springbok team that are prickly, that are defiantly not going to want to go 4 in a row in terms of L's, so they will be coming for them, and their first port of call has to be fix their offensive breakdown. Mind the pill in the offensive breakdown. It's obviously it's one of their great strengths that they run tracking lines and support lines that with the ambition of getting the offload there and getting their hands free and managing to pick them apart that way. But the net result towards the end of that game was just, like, particularly the last quarter in general, and even that period over half time when they were looking to score their obligatory try, they were getting snuffed out because the Boks were all over them at every second ruck. They were getting hands in and slowing it down or turning it over, and it's like your offense will never purr while that is the tempo of ball that you're dealing with, or that's the quality of ball that you're dealing with.
I mean, it towards the tail end as well. Like, it was funny that the way that Quinn Tupaia turnover came about was that they actually recovered a poor kick from Pollard, and then in an attempted offload it was batted back by Nkosi, and then the Springboks gathered it, and then there came the turnover. And I was like, gee, if that ball had gone into the breakdown with an All Black carrying it would have been just as likely to be a turnover the other way. Sometimes towards the tail end of these long sequences, you're nearly better off not having the ball than having it. And just in little moments, when if their Springboks are around, there's certainly no harm in dropping it on the toe, putting little chaotic infield kicks when you're not being punished on the kick back, and it's a chance to apply pressure and keep the ball alive. It's just important that you don't kick it too deep and allow them to go to the 22 and kick it out for a line out and then put pressure on your line out, and then you're slow again. Like, once you've generated the chaos play, the All Blacks are always going to be looking to score, but little kicks in behind to keep the ball in field and just shy of their 22, when you know that there's not much punishment coming back, could allow you to work in your own defence and your own sort of turnover plays.
Don't play the Springbok strengths into the game quite so much as they were by the end.
And just keep it alive, keep them running, keep them turning. And little infield kicks, I think certainly are a worthy adjustment. In the likes of Bowden Barrett can of course dial them in on the chaos plays, because they are going to have to find ways to deal with what is a very good Springbok defence. And the easy thing, and if this happens they'll be laughing, there's no major adjustments to make, is to bust them up on the inside, as the Wallabies showed, as we were talking about praying for the Lions to do, is to isolate that little bit of space in and around the 12 channel, overload Del Indy a little bit, get an offload down here.
Pollard if he finds himself
exactly. Get back rowers and your most explosive dynamic ball carriers into that channel. Like Anton Leonard-Brown coming in is going to have a major job in there.
But similarly, Sevilla can charge down that like a bull as well.
Ioane, absolutely.
All of these guys.
And linking off
if you don't like
the
matchup of Havili and Dale Indy, which I don't think they necessarily do physicality wise.
It didn't look good last
No,
week.
but if you want the first job done, you can even send Khaleesi down. They were putting him in the midfield carry role for a few of them last week. Khaleesi. I'm saying sit Khaleesi down in terms of the out wide, and then try and just overload that channel first and then go flash it wide. They need a little bit more in general. From all of that in terms of setting things up off their line out. They were so poor last week, mainly because they were a bit shell-shocked, and you saw it with Brodie Retallick giving away little cheap penalties. He gave away a kind of obstruction penalty on his opposite man that was needless under a kick thing, but it was born of line-out pressure, things not quite starting.
The whole unit, Joe Moody was getting the Moody blues as well. Just all over. They were a little bit rocked, a little bit shell-shocked, a little bit out-muscled in those tight areas, and I would count the midfield as part of that. But that's absolutely an area that they'll have to get on top of, just not allowing the box to dominate the collision area so much. It makes all the counter-rucking and all of the defensive pressure that the box want to put you under a lot more difficult if you can explosively get through them in that midfield, in that little soft area in and around the 10 channel, which I'm not sure that the box have corrected so much as they couldn't find with David Havili last week.
No, there was a combination of that, and they were jumping at 2 by the end of the first half, and it just meant it's just too wide a pass to try and find
even
that
then
space.
they were going wide of 12. They were
true.
all the All Blacks were going wide of 12 off first phase, and I was just like, that is so wrong. That is so wrong. You need someone cutting a really hard angle, trying to attack that Del Indy channel, and preferably someone like a Sever Reece off his wing, but someone with explosive speed, someone like an Ardi Savia either, linking off one another and finding just that little bit of a half break that just opens up the whole defense, and then from there your skill and your systems are going to just take over.
Then go wide. If they succeed in that phase, then the wide option is there, and they can find a bit more space. But they weren't quite isolating it in week 1, and as such, they weren't really able to get their starter plays going for the majority of the game. And in fact, they were able to jostle for position enough to get into some kickable penalty ranges, which was ultimately what managed to wrestle the game from the box in the end. But as far as setting up their own offense, despite the ambition to go wide a few times that they were definitely displaying, they didn't quite manage to earn that right, as is the old adage, by sitting down that defense. And that's why you saw more renewed showings from Am and Dale Inde in the centre role and in the defensive centre role, because the All Blacks were probably a little bit impatient in terms of things were going wrong at source, so we'll go wide, which is probably a little bit backwards, but it's very, very enthusiastic. It's quite a noble kind of trait in them that if things are a little bit stop-start, we're going to probe out wide and try and find our strike runners. It's a lovely instinct, and a lovely courageous instinct that lots of teams don't have. But as you're right to point out, and Karevi is the guy who illustrated it, that is the hard line that sets that up. That first phase off any strike move needs to be built from that, and then there might be a chance to fold. If you just discombobulate and disconnect their midfield, that's when they're more susceptible to being pulled this way and that. And that coupled with ball in play times being kept high, tempo being kept high, you can see it very
that first 2.5 minutes.
It was the perfect illustration. If they can do more of that, if they can do that for more than 2.5 minutes in the game, they'll be laughing.
They want the Springboks to be puffing and blowing, and once they get the Springboks puffing and blowing and on their heels, turned a little bit, the pitch will open. The
offloads will come,
and it'll become a game of skill sets.
Guys like Aumua off the bench, guys like Mo'unga off the bench could be finding a field day if they've already tuckered those big Springboks out by then. That's when you want guys like McKenzie coming round and going.
And then the scoreline blows up and becomes whatever you're taking, whatever you're executing, and the All Blacks like no other team can be unrelenting.
As tight a contest as this is on paper, and as much as the Boks dominated large periods of the game last week, if the All Blacks get their game right, there's no reason they can't bonus point win it, even though it's as tight a contest as there is in World Rugby. Just the way they play the game means they're going to score tries when they're hot, and if they're hot at all, they will run it in.
Absolutely, and it's just about finding the tools to unpick that Springbok defence, and then also on the other end of the ball, just being a little bit better at set piece. Obviously, the scrum time they're up against it, but I flagged at the beginning of the preview that I think Oxenche is a little weak. I think Napo Lalala should be looking to hold down that right hand side of the Kiwi scrum, and if they do that, they're going to be in grand stead to just lock that off as an area of intrigue in the game. And likewise the line out, just a couple more adjustments. I mean, Lou Diager took 40 minutes but then got a pretty good read on their calls. They might have to vary it up a little bit, maybe get Luke Jacobson up, get Artie Sevilla up. Just obviously like they'll set piece coaches know better than I what exactly was going on in there in terms of the read that Diager had going on. But a little bit more deception, a few other calls, trusting Cody Taylor to make good throws.
Trusting Brad Weber to get them moving from 9.
They can't just relent and throw to 2 every time. They got to get the jump up on Lou Diager and win.
Actually the Boks just love forcing you into 2. They know all about what those little line-out concessions mean and how much they get buoyed up by it. So if they can kind of strike off a clean ball off 6, I'm sure they've been working that set piece all week. If they can manage to get themselves all the way to the tail of the line-out before peeling off it and then sitting down that inside, if they're patient enough, they will find scores this time. They'll be looking to improve in all areas.
Absolutely. And listen, with all that said, how do you see this one going? Is this a blacklash of kinds, or is this a bocklash after the stinging defeat?
I don't know. I'm humming and hawing. I think I know what the favourites tag is. The favourites suggest that the All Blacks will win.
You don't go far in this game betting against the All
You
Blacks.
don't go far betting against them, and they do look good value for it. The All Blacklash is normally a real thing, although they did win last week, so it's more of a bocklash, as you say. I don't know, maybe I do have faith in the Boks to try and make this another dogged affair and dominate us a lot, but
and there's just something about those big games from the All Black point of view that rarely can they put the bigness of the game out of their head, which is why I think last week was close, but there's a chance that this week, meaning a little less to them perhaps, even though it is for a Grand Slam, but now they have the 100th test won, and they did there, we forgot to mention even at the top of the show there, Capo Pongo, and how good that was. Maybe that they'll loosen up and be better, but then on the other end of the coin, the Springbok defense can eat alive the best of them, and we actually didn't mention enough. I know we were talking briefly about Khaleesi there, but we didn't mention even in up until this point just how good he was, which goes to show how many talking points there are from these games. But he was out of this world good. His best performance in a long while. He was excellent, like Hooper-esque in terms of his work rate and his output. He was absolutely everywhere on the field, and if he can repeat those heroics, then this young All Black offense could come unstuck, and then who knows? I'm leaning this way in that. I think I'm going to just say, for argument's sake, that the Boks get it done this week. I think they win by a point or 2 in a scrappy one again, and we're treated to 2 back-to-back classics, and the All Blacks get a little bit of dirt. What kind of try scoring are we talking about here?
I think we're talking 1 intercept try for Mapimpi.
And who throws the pick?
The pick is thrown by maybe Bowden. He's not immune to throwing picks, but maybe himself or Havili under pressure, someone like that.
Wow.
Huge call. I'm going to say that. It is a huge call. I'm sure the Kiwi fans in the comments are like, nah, mate. No.
Yeah. There's a rare enough thing to see you go for the Boks and me not go for the Boks. No, but that is what's happening here. I think the All Blacks, I've a lot of faith in Foster's project, and I think the fact that they were able to dig out the win,
they do look the best.
I think they'll improve. I think they'll improve, and I'm not sure if the Springboks will, and so I think I back the All Blacks to win, probably by a little more, maybe even more than a score.
Going to do them good. Actually, a little tidbit about it was that as of last week, they become the first Test side in World Rugby to reach 17,000 points in Test Rugby. They passed that landmark last week, and if they can keep scoring like that, maybe they'll have too much.
They'll probably get to 20,000 before anyone else reaches the 17 mark.
They are the top scoring offense. They're high flying All Blacks. They're number 1 in the world now, and they cemented that last last week, but can they go one better and complete their Grand Slam in the Rugby Championship? Let us know what you think. Drop your comment down below. Who you got? Are you supporting your Springboks? Are you saying they'll defy it? Or are you going to go with the odds makers and say the All Blacks win in emphatic style?
Either way, it's going to be a juicy contest anyway.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to this one. And we're going to move on now to the other game that was going on in the Rugby Championship last weekend. It was not the curtain raiser, actually it was the prime time show.
Yes, it was.
After that little curtain raiser 100th text between the Springboks and the Wallabies. I must say, by the way, awesome stadium in Queensland, the stadium they were in. I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it was a Queensland Country Bank Stadium.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a great occasion after that classic match between the Boks and the All Blacks. The Wallabies were in for that. The Wallaby fans were in for that. Everybody stayed around for this game.
Yeah, bums on seats. It was good to see.
Yeah, it was a great crowd, great atmosphere, and the Wallabies put on a show. I mean, this was kind of a flex from them. They're like, the Springbok wins were not a fluke.
No.
The Bledisloe defeats were a consequence of playing the best team in the world and a team that you match up against poorly.
That's also true. Yeah.
That was unfortunate, but I think this was the Wallabies very much demonstrating that they are right there among the top sides in the world, and if you're a little off that, like the Pumas, you're not going to have a chance against them. They didn't look brittle in this game. The Pumas are a sticky opponent at the best of times.
Yeah.
They
Even
did
at the
take
worst times. They were very dominant at scrum time. Australia had very little success on their own ball with the scrum, which was unlike them. They've been very dominant in that area. But similarly, mauls, they were good in the tight. They were physical. They defended them gamely. They stymied the Wallabies.
Stole a few lineouts. They were definitely
combative and tricky and
good. Good at the set piece, good defensively, and yet unlike last year in the early days of the Rennie project, when Australia were the only team working on offense against all the defenses, they were not caused that many problems by it. They got up early and stayed up for the rest of the game. Comfortably the better side, moved the ball really well, has some marrying some explosive ball player, game breaking ball carriers with some really creative players. Great balance of distribution and strike running in this team, and they're wetting it really well. I mean, Dave Rennie, how well does he know attacking rugby?
This is it, and also just where are the stocks coming from? I mean, like Banks, who had been brilliant, drops out with a broken arm. Unlucky for him, but Reece Hodge took all of 5 minutes to get himself on the score sheet with a lovely executed line. Little soft from Sinti, to be honest, in the tackle from an Argentinian point of view. Lovely young attacking thriving 13 as it was, but he was it's kind of shades of Campagnaro for Italy, where he's like decent going forward, but the floundering attempted tackle where he just kind of swivels off the hips. But a very strong finish from Hodge, and I actually thought the second of the tries was my favourite of them, just in terms of like all of the unsurety or the uncertainty around what their A team was in terms of their midfield, and you saw the one that they've arrived on by the end of this Rugby Championship, the one that they're going to trust again this week, of Quaid at 10 with Karevi and Ikitau, and they all combined beautifully for that second try, where Quaid drops it just after a lovely sequence of attacking rugby, a delicious little grubber through the middle that sits up perfectly for Ikitau to claim just under the sticks, and then Karevi peels blindside and goes over under the sticks. Initially Maloney on comms thinks he's held up, but there's no one holding this Karevi up from this year. Not in 2021 there ain't, because he was always getting that down. And that midfield just absolutely purring and picking apart this oft very stoic midfield defence from the Argentinians. They were pulling them this way and that, certainly at the beginning of the game, and they were also getting on top without the ball as well. That was almost more of a story in this, because like in the week prior, Argentina had kind of stumbled upon this backline with Guerreras at 10 and all this, and a bit more excitement, and they were a little bit better with ball in hand. But this week, with the pressure that the Wallabies brought from very early stages, guys like Boffelli were just frozen out of the game because they couldn't get it, and guys like Carreras were overwhelmed at 10.
What we're seeing now from the Wallabies is the flip side of the negative of having to play the All Blacks all the time. You know, it damages the confidence, it hurts your record, obviously, and your standing, can hurt your the engagement with the game from a grassroots level, because they're just the matchup is so poor, the defeat's so constant that it just gets discouraging.
Dizzying,
But when they come up against any other offense in the world,
they're conditioned for a much higher tempo game than those guys are bringing.
Exactly, and a little bit better from the Pumas was not enough. They have game breaking players all over the field on both sides of the ball, but they also just have a lot of speed and a lot of energy. Valentini and Hooper
awesome
in those loose forwards. They bring so much on both sides of the ball. They never stop running. Karevi now coming out of the line. Like, they have so much explosion and real engine and a bit of depth now as well.
Yeah,
but their energy on defense is great, just as it is on offense. They're constantly playing alert, heads up, high tempo rugby, and it was way too much for this slow, laboured, poor Pumas side.
Argentina managed a maul try at the beginning of the second half to get themselves in, but Boffelli actually missed. We were bigging up his kicking game, Big Boot Boffelli, as he is affectionately known on this podcast, because he is a lovely stroker of
He's
football.
a heck of a boot on him.
He does, but he did manage to hook a few, including one that would have given them a 3-0 lead in the early exchanges that I know they only would have loved.
Wouldn't have mattered.
No, it wouldn't have mattered ultimately, but it was little kind of daggers in their heart, because if they're not scoring those threes, they're not probably scoring that many. However, their maul did manage to get on top in the second half from a Pumas point of view, but then the flip side of it is, for all that forward energy and dominance, and that was a very good maul that resulted in a good try for Montoya, the captain, but then like a few minutes later they have another maul from the middle third that they managed to milk a penalty advantage off, and then they bleed to the short side. They managed to drop it on the toe for Boffelli to chase. He drops it on the toe, lovely little outside of the boot kick on that Hodge gobbles up, and then Kramer, needlessly under penalty advantage, just swings a leg out there, kicks Reece Hodge in the shins effectively, and overturns the penalty and gets himself a yellow card.
Yeah, and he did it again. He did it twice in this game. Both times with a penalty advantage. He also had a late hit off the ball.
Yeah, that was 10 minutes before the card that he could have been carded for.
And that was to make it a one-score game. I believe in both instances, the three-pointer, the would-be three-pointer would have made it a one-score game.
Yeah.
So yeah,
shooting yourself in the foot.
The Pumas are all wrong at the moment. Their attack is laboured. It's at least developing, and it was nice to see Bertrand identify that space and have a cut.
Yeah.
Good to see Boffelli out there on the wing, and it's good that they're trying to feed him the ball. But yeah, they can be eaten alive by any quality defence because they're so early in their development. But just broadly speaking, the team is a bit of a mess right now. And like, as good as the defensive energy is when it works, when it goes wrong, it's just all over the place.
As they inevitably are, because they're defending all the time.
The mentality of the players, like it just shouldn't take. I know it's easy to say from the outside, and they're trying to compete with the very, very best in the world. Yeah. But it seems to take them getting to such an emotional edge, like to live with these teams. Like last year, all of the energy that went into those defensive performances, it seems to take them to such an emotional state and an emotional place that they can't control themselves.
Yeah,
and then they're just
very little thinking going on, certainly from those forward units.
There's too many players in that pack.
Well, we always cited Lavanini, and I still maintain Lavanini's a penalty machine, but Kramer in 2021 form is running him close.
He's
that
doing him.
He's a raging bull out there.
It's killing them. It's like as you say, under penalty advantage. It's so senseless. It's so cheap, and it's just
tilted. Anything than just shooting yourself in the foot, like just
raging, angry little. Crazy.
No, he's not
plays.
little. He's not little.
No, just the plays. They're just these little niggly, silly plays that they come out with. And Guido Petty's a man for them as well. Lavanini, you cited. I mean, there's way too many guys in this pack who are just seeing red and doing really, really dumb stuff on the pitch. Yeah. That is killing them.
Petty was the talking point during those Springbok games. He kept infringing at line-out time. And Lavanini, we were citing, he came bad in the World Cup and all of this. And then Kramer this has been his year for taking the lead in terms of the penalty machine man. Yeah. But he is definitely that, and they are killing themselves. And the fact remains, like, it goes to that first game against the All Blacks where they actually defended them really well at times, and they did that again here. Like, the only gloss removed from the Wallaby point of view, like, it was 3 on the bounce for the first time since 2017. Great stuff for Rennie to be kicking off, but they didn't get their bonus point try, and not for lack of trying. Kellaway did keep scoring. That one second half try came from a lovely James O'Connor inside ball to Kellaway, the young man who's in form, a winger in form, grabbing tries. Great asset. But the slight niggle is that they had several chances to ice that game with some style, with aplomb, with another try, and they botched them.
As they were in Bledisloe, and they were just a little loose, little non-clinical, and at their worst, that's what this side kind of is.
Some passes to deck, pullback passes to deck instead of look passes to hand.
It's a true line with all Rennie teams. I think of even when he was in charge of Glasgow, but even going back to that great Chiefs team, like, they were absolutely beautiful when they were on song, and some of the set plays, but also some of the joyous chaos plays.
Kick return.
Their capacity to score in every moment was great, but when they were dialed out, it was ugly and got worse, and they would make a bad problem into a terrible problem, and all of his teams have had that hallmark, and all of his teams have at their worst been a little bit wasteful.
Yeah,
and
they
certainly
definitely were that towards the end of the game. And it's the only concern is that it goes back to those 2 draws last year in terms of they wasted a hell of a lot of chances in those games and felt they had the winning of it, but for what they left out there. And whereas like in this one, it's a slight frustration because it's an echo of that. But this result really, coupled with those draws from last year, just shows the difference in trajectory from these sides. We've seen Rennie's side, a young side, blood a load more players, get some talent back and really bolster their squad and grow through 2021, taking their lumps from the All Blacks notwithstanding, but they have really grown and developed, and back-to-back wins over the Springboks, it's been great for them. Whereas the Pumas have definitely dropped off where they were last year, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and it's not even that they haven't dropped off. Well, they've probably dropped off a little bit, but they've also just, they haven't grown. Like they
have. Well, players like Kramer were excellent last year, making all kinds of headlines for bullish showings.
It was because other teams played into their hands a little more. Like, I'm convinced this time last year, or during that autumn series and the Tri-Nations at the same time, really Rennie's Wallabies were the one. Rennie's Wallabies and Pivac's Wales, and maybe France as well, were the 3 teams who were bucking the trend, trying to play a bit of offense. Everyone else was going defense, and it was
including the All Blacks. They were defending a lot themselves.
Absolutely, they were kicking loads of ball. They were about set piece and power, and that's kind of why when the Pumas just said no, you can have all of the ball in territory and try and break us down.
I think they had actually 60-something% possession in territory.
They actually couldn't do it, and they were made to go home and learn their lessons. And then this year, the Pumas do the exact same thing, only the offenses are way ready for it.
Well, Reece Hodge grabs a try in the first 10 minutes.
They're past ready for it. They're past done dealing with that stuff. They're picking much sharper lines, sharper passes, better systems. And the game has moved Ledesma's Pumas by, and they haven't evolved with it in the last year. It's come on a lot since then.
It's true.
And now you're just starting to see perhaps the weaknesses of these guys where you didn't last year, because they were on the front foot. They were winning their collisions. Once it starts to go wrong, they start to flounder and flap a little bit. But I think, the narrative of this game was absolutely just that the Wallabies have, as you say, come on leaps and bounds and are just a very, very fine attacking side. And they're lovely and physical.
Third in the world rankings, and they've only consolidated it now.
And they're just playing their game. They didn't drop down to the level of their opponent. They didn't have any of those concerns. They're just playing their game. They are at home, but and maybe it's as a result of that, and we'll learn a bit more about them in November. But they're at the moment, they just look really, really settled, and they're just getting better and better.
They do. And guys like Tupou, who I hope stays fit forever, because he's a glory to watch right now as well.
He's the number one tight head in the world right now.
They have a lot of quality there, and it's an enviable position that Oz have found themselves in, which is not something that we were saying in week 2 of the Bledisloe series. We were a bit more down on them then, but it's what a turnaround. And Rennie has already vindicated already a lot of good records to write home about, and he is 100% the right man to take them on to Rugby World Cup 2023 and perhaps beyond. I think he's already secured that based on all evidence.
I love his project. I love this Rennie project, and I do wish it all the success. I hope it goes well for them. I think they're great to watch, and I like this.
Really
the Wallabies
watching them
might be on the way back to glory again. But before any of that, they do have a final match in the Rugby Championship to play this week against Argentina. This one they do have to. It's an away match. It's Argentina are at home, so they're going to have to travel all the way to Seabus Stadium in Queensland.
Yes,
to take on the Argentinians in their backyard,
their home patch of Queensland. That being said, some of them won't be available, but that's right. It is going to be in Seabus Super Stadium, Saturday, 2nd of October. It's the curtain raiser this time, so the matches are flipped in terms of kick-off times. It's going to be kicking off at 8:05, that's our time, 8:05 in the AMs, and 5:05 local time as well. So a nice kind of evening kick-off.
Curtain raiser for the All Black South Africans, and you are under orders, I tell you what, because it's Saturday, not Sunday, so all Australian fans who attend that match are under orders.
Remain in the seats.
To remain in your seat until the final whistle of the New Zealand-South Africa game.
Yes.
They definitely won't do that if it's a blowout at all.
No, indeed.
But I mean, let's keep that ground full, because that was awesome last week. It was great to see the big crowd in there last week, and it's definitely added to the occasion to a huge extent. Piper in the middle with the whistle, with Nick Berry and Ruben Keane on the AO positions, and Brett Crownin in at TMO, as he will be for the light again.
So we have an Australian TMO and a South African ref for it, which is interesting, but obviously, we're making all of this happen in Australia, and we're grateful for it.
I did notice there were some Puma fans giving out about the the refereeing of the course of the last weeks, and there's definitely some accusations of bias. It is true that their referees should be given more of a chance at test level to flourish. I mean, there are referees in Argentina.
They ref a lot of the slower games and stuff, but
there's no convincing me that the referee has anything to do with the penalty count going against the Pumas. It's all on them.
It is.
And
they keep giving away penalties.
Yeah,
Stop
it's the
giving
first
them away.
port of call.
Yeah.
And these two teams, obviously, as of this week, Australia with the win, they've now moved to 26 wins. Argentina having 6 wins in the course of their 35 meetings, 3 of those also ending in a draw. And the Pumas' last win did come on Australian soil in 2018. But obviously since then they had the 2 draws last year, and now the Wallabies coming in with a flexing great win last week and just looking head and shoulders the best team.
A better team.
And from the squad point of view, we do actually have the teams this week.
Yes, they're both named.
So we can move on and look at them. We're going to start with the allegedly home side, that is Argentina.
Yes.
And they obviously have had serious issues with their squad.
Yes,
just if they didn't have enough problems.
No, indeed. This is one of the kind of talking points around it, and you can get into all kinds of things to blame. But anyway, the UAR have revealed 6 players that have travelled to Byron Bay. 6 members of their squad essentially have travelled outside of quarantine rules to New South Wales, and they will now have to stay there. They're not eligible because of quarantine for selection, and a few of them probably weren't going to be used, but some of them definitely were. Names like Pablo Matera would scream at you, Santiago Madrano, Cecino as well, Felipe Escura and Sebastian Cancelliere, as well as Joaquin Diaz.
Felipe Escura, but yes.
Joaquin Diaz-Benicia as well. All of them.
I definitely don't blame Diaz-Benicia for going out to the spa, because
he's not getting
any love from the coaches, so why should he give any back? But yeah, some of those other guys, you're wondering, they're going to be quite light, but obviously within their 40-man squad, they have enough to cover.
Madrano and
even Cecino,
has been coming off the bench, but obviously Matera is the main one that they will be missing. He had been captain for them last year. He's a big spiritual leader. He's one of their few big colossus men in that pack who don't go floundering about and giving away reckless penalties all the time, which is kind of, he's outnumbered, but he's going to be even more so now this week, which is a shame.
Yeah, it's true.
It's unfortunate for them. It's just been a bit of a campaign that's gone from bad to worse for Argentina. Obviously they didn't realise that they wouldn't be able to get out. It was made in ignorance rather than in malice or in kind of protest, but the net result is that the guys aren't available for selection, and they're going to have a changed team as a result of it.
It was a mistake, all right. This is the side that they've gone for to round out their, as you say, pretty poor campaign. Rodrigo Martinez at loosehead, Montoya stays in there at hooker, Pieretto at tight head.
He comes in at tight head.
Yeah, Guido Petty gets the nod in with Lavanini at lock, so that Kramer can move to the back row, and partner Juan Martin Gonzalez, been pretty anonymous so far in his showings, and Rodrigo Bruni, who has been a one bright light out of this Pumas campaign. He's been
so necessary that he's there, given that Matera is not available, and Facundo Isa's scoring tries for Toulon, as we said. So it's going to be important that Bruni shines.
Yeah, they're much funner backline than the one that started the season.
That's true.
Is still in place. Bertranu, who does read defenses pretty well. Santiago Carreras at 10, who's exciting. A winger come out half is always fun.
True.
Chocobaras and Cinti have offensive potential as a pairing, and Buffelli can go off. Moroni comes in for Cordero, despite I think Moroni broke his nose recently, but who needs their nose? Maybe he might be in one of those crazy Terminator masks,
or Hannibal Lecter looking thing out there in the pitch. Could be.
And Juan Cruz Malia then at fullback rounds out a pretty exciting backline for the Pumas.
Yeah, exciting line. They were definitely eaten alive last week by the enthusiasm and accuracy of the Wallaby D, as well as the slight inaccuracy and hesitance of their own offense. So hopefully they can remedy that and get something going with the ball in hand, which is all we're asking for from the campaign.
Yeah, indeed.
On the bench then, they have Bosch, Galia and Bello, I believe, or Gallo and Bello covering the front row. Alemano is there covering lock. He's a man who's been in there before. And Francisco Garson comes in to cover the back row, obviously getting deep into the squad there. Gonzalo Garcia covering the halfback position, with Domingo Miotti and Mateo Carreras on the bench. So good impact there, and guys who have caps and experience. Garrison, obviously, he has been capped before as well, but he comes in, given that they're missing a few back rows due to the main talking point for them as far as the squad's concerned, which are those 6 players now unavailable, and just the absolute mess in terms of organising it that has gone on.
I mean, the job doesn't get easier. The Wallabies have gone with a pretty strong and pretty consistent side. They've freshened things up in a few areas, but I mean, the front row is meaty. Slipper still in there. He needs to keep his feet, but he's a solid loose head.
He is.
Falau Faianga gets the nod at hooker, probably their most consistent performer there. And then Taniela Tupou, we all know about. We love him. We love to watch him, and we hope he does 80 minutes.
Yes.
Isaac Rodda and Darcy Swain get the start this week, with Philip dropping to the bench. And then you got Samu, Hooper, and Valentini as perhaps their
good
most
form getting rewarded with a start.
Yeah, it's their most mobile back row selection. I mean, it's
the energy levels from those guys should be getting through a boatload of work out there.
Exactly
for sure.
right, which opens things up for this exciting looking back line with Nick White and Quade Cooper maintaining their veteran position in the key distribution positions. Then Karevi and Ikitau not disrupted at centre because they worked so well, but they do get Pataya in there on the wing.
They do.
And Kellaway switches to the left-hand side at the expense of Korobete, and Reece Hodge comes in covering fullback. And interestingly enough, Tom Wright also, who we haven't seen all year, is in on the bench. So then he's going to get a chance. James O'Connor, who came on, we didn't mention actually in the review of last game.
We mentioned him throwing an inside ball for a nice pass.
He made his return, and it's great to see him back, and he's going to be covering out half and a couple of other positions as well if needed. Jake Gordon is going to get a chance to come on. Tate McDermott not given the look in this time around. And likewise, Sean McMahon. Yeah,
Sean McMahon, excited to see him if he is to make an entrance, which I'm sure he will, in the back row. It'll be his first game since 2017 when he played Scotland, and he was a barnstorming tour de force in 2017.
He was literally close to one of the best players in the world. Like if he'd been nominated, I'm not sure if he was nominated or not for World Player of the Year. I don't think so, but if he was, you wouldn't have batted an eyelid. Like he was very, very good. He was spearheading that Wallaby side and was just a workhorse, and by all accounts has been tearing it up in Japan.
Well, Karevi was singing his praises, hoping for him to make a return to the fold, and here it is now. And there's been a lot of returning to the fold in terms of bolstering that squad that's gone on. And it's a testament to Rennie. He's building a lot of depth there in advance of the World Cup, and he's just blooding a lot of players.
There is talent in Australia.
There is.
So says Dave Rennie.
And he's managing to find it, which is great. Pataya starting on the wing is good as well, but the other interesting things are in the front row. Matt Phillips, is dropped to the bench for this week in favour of Rodda and Swain starting. Just they're rotating those guys well and managing minutes. But in the front row, Lachie Lonergan gets a look in at hooker, who is when last time I saw him he was a little bit wee up there and he was struggling a little bit with the pace, but hopefully he can get in and put his hand up as well. Angus Bell, who you've been citing as probably their best loose head at the minute,
100%,
looks a very mobile guy. He had a lot of good carries off the bench last week as well. He's very, very good in the loose, as much as he's a very excellent scrummager too. His dynamism in the carry is a great asset to them, especially off the bench. But then Greg Holmes is the big story from Wallaby camp this week. Greg Holmes, 38-year-old Greg Holmes, comes in to cover tight head, and should they use him, I mean, it's possible that they go full 80 with Tupou. They've done so before if they don't trust him, but if he comes in, he will become the oldest capped Wallaby of the professional era, and the oldest capped Wallaby since World War II. That record goes all the way back. You have to go back to, Tony Miller took the field for them at 38 back in World War II. So it's a while ago, but Greg Holmes could be set to book that, and I kind of good luck to him. Hopefully he comes on for a few minutes and manages to get that cap, because it's great.
To be honest with you, 38 seems a little young for such a crazy stat, but there you go. They like to play quick footy, they always have, and it's a young man's game.
Yeah, no, it's true. Even though in tight head prop years 38 makes more sense. If he was a winger, you'd be thinking 38's maybe getting on a little.
For sure. Your tight head prop should be holding that record for your team regardless of when it was.
That's true.
The oldest player to feature, although Johnny Sexton would beg to differ. As we'll talk about in Ireland, I don't doubt in the months to come he's not going anywhere.
No.
Those are the squads, and I think in terms of the balance of them, I think you would give the edge to the Wallabies. But we're going to start our preview by looking at things from the Pumas' point of view.
Yes.
And it's an interesting one. I mean, where the Springbok analysis was kind of, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't need to use this game against the All Blacks to develop an offense or change the way that we play from the middle third when we've had such success with our other game plan. Maybe it's just a question of doing these few things a little better that we know we do so well. With the Pumas, I think it's a different equation. As much as they try to model themselves on the Springboks, I think categorically what they're trying to do at the moment is failing badly against these top sides. It's the wrong way to approach sides with better squads than you, and they're getting found out week after week after week, and there really isn't much sense in playing a game that revolves around their defense, that involves a lot of kicking, that takes, pot shot 3-pointers and hopes to hustle their way to like a 12-10 win somehow.
Yeah.
This
it's a myth, that 12-10 win.
No, it's not coming, and they need to they badly need to develop a different way of playing, and they badly need to go back to their roots, which are not the same as Springbok roots. As much as Argentina teams have always loved to have a big scrum, the South American sides really as a whole have developed an iconic kind of near enough iconic style that they're always like little guys with great speed, and they do play constant football with each other, whether it's with the feet or the hands. They link up onto the wide channels and they do you with their pace, and they play not dissimilar, a different but similar style to your South Sea Islanders and your
France,
Wallabies,
flooding small channels with lots of numbers, and
it's probably
quick
closest
hands
to France than it is to anything.
Having a big scrum and being keen on that thing and kicking your threes, but also being able to recognise a short side that's under resourced and flood it with fast men. Like that's the key that's missing for them, and it's like, no matter how well you defend, and we've been highlighting it all tournament long, a lot of their defence has been really good. Their goal line stands at the end of last week's game to deny the Wallabies their bonus point was really good, and there's no reason to stop being really good at defending, but there is a reason to stop making your game plan about defending, because it's just not going to work. You need to be able to attack and find a bit of space, not least because from a developmental point of view, you want to see Czech's fingerprints on it, you want to see building blocks towards the World Cup, and we're mid-World Cup cycle, which we've said traditionally is when the Argentinians are at their lowest ebb in terms of all kinds of energy, and we've seen a bit of that. But even with that said, you want to see shoots of optimism and shoots of just identifying that as a problem. And partly this selection of the new backline that they found during the course of this tournament is a bit of evidence to
100%,
that. And they found a try last week, albeit a maul try, but it's like they've started to accrue more scores over the course of the tournament. They, like, ideally, even if they concede a load of tries, if they concede 40 points this week, like, if they are to concede that many, I would hope they would score at least 2 tries. Or at least, rather than managing to, like what they did with the All Blacks, score nil, play a very good nil, and keep them to 39, which is very impressive considering you defended for, like, 70 minutes of the game. But, like, they just can't do that. The Wallabies will punish them just like the All Blacks will if they are going to play that way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it feels like they have identified their problem to some extent. But it almost feels like the backline are trying to move the ball a little bit. It's a little bit clumsy, but it might get better. But I don't think that the back row or even the back five have quite got the memo.
No.
And that's why I think two of the key performers really this week, Gonzalez at 6, who I haven't seen enough of in a positive sense.
He hasn't really made too many impacts on the games.
No, indeed. Yeah. And Bruni at 8, who has been very good this year.
It'd be nice to see a little less of Kramer maybe as well as seeing more of those guys.
He needs to be a defensive guy, but like he's an example of someone who, with the adjustment and the quicker games that they're finding themselves in, isn't coping at all and is like getting really frustrated by his inability to have an impact, and then taking it out to
make a literal impact.
Yeah, taking it out on the opposition and really on his own team by costing them dearly in some big plays. And the likes of Lavanini, Kramer and Petty will need to be better, but they'll also, like, it's on the other guys as well to step up and be more of a link between backline and forward pack to allow them to resource more rucks.
Yeah.
And just even simple things like Bruni's been very effective in the carry game. He's got through a few contacts. He can get an offload. Picking lines on him in slightly wide channels.
Looking for an offload, even in narrow channels, looking for an offload is something that, like, we aren't seeing them as keen to hit lines. So we're seeing them keen to come up on pressure defend, which you have to be if you're going to be a defensive team, of course, but just that same enthusiasm and same speed going forward, and a bit of ambition to get the hands free and try and unpick the defence.
Yeah, from some, not from everybody. No. I don't want to see Kramer trying an offload because he'll fire it at
the
someone.
turf or at someone else.
Indeed, and some of those forwards, it's a little dodgy, but Bruni's a proper footballer.
Montoya is one.
Yeah, exactly. Just getting through the game line, as you say, picking hard lines and sitting the Wallabies down and then opening the field up a little bit to allow your footballers to make some plays and make some reads. It's going to be a little clunky. You're still going to have guys like Karevi coming up in your face.
You may want to line up a little deeper than you did just to allow Carreras to get the ball through his hands, because he was swallowed up by that Karevi shoot too often. You didn't see any of Chocobaris' attacking potential because it wasn't even getting that far.
And they do all have it, but it starts by sitting them down, getting a little bit on the front foot, as you say, sitting a little bit deeper, and then maybe, who knows, you've got new wingers out there, you've got Pataya, you've got Callaway has been settled in there, but the Wallaby wingers, they can a bit like Welsh wingers, they can come up a little bit, and all of a sudden, those 50-22s backing your football ability is rarely a losing play for the Pumas. Like, they do have very natural kickers.
Carreras showed in that crossfield kick for that try by Buffelli that he has a pinpoint crossfielder, a pinpoint accurate kick.
Buffelli himself and Malia and Chocobaras all have footballing ability.
Boot.
So little attacking kicks, but also deep kicks, 50-22s, especially when the maul is one of the few ins that you feel like you have in the game.
True.
Like trying to work those from the middle of the field, and just playing a smarter game all around is something I want to see from the Pumas side, because they're complete no-hopers in this competition as long as they continue to be the dumbest side in it, and they are firmly that, if not the dumbest side in world rugby at the moment. They're pushing Spain. Spain are the only one who I'd rank ahead of them right now, because as good as they are, they're just playing really bad games and making such stupid mistakes every week.
Kicking 3 for 14-3 down as well, and then ultimately conceding again. Like, just never really threatening to be in a competitive match, despite being competitive in moments in the match, showing that their scrum is good, their defense is good, their defensive breakdown is annoying. Like, their players are all very big and physical, so you'd like to see them marry it with a little bit of composure, and the discipline will come down if they can get some kind of control in the game. If they can get close to 50-50 possession, 50-50 territory, they'll find they won't need to be as reckless in these contacts, because they won't be throwing everything at it because they feel they're chasing the game. Like, they kind of force themselves to chase the game with the way they're playing at the moment. So we'd like to see that little adjustment, and maybe we'll have a bit more of a competitive contest if we can see the Pumas.
Yeah, that's it. And green shoots, offensive green shoots. That's all I want. It's not working. There's no point going back to it. What they've been doing.
It's true.
From the Wallaby point of view, things have been working. Why not go back to them?
Don't change too much. They won this game very handsomely last week, and we know exactly how. They were incisive from the opening minute. They looked to get after them, and that Hodge try was just reward for playing a high tempo game against a team that are going to fancy try and slow down and punish you without the ball. Correct.
And they're going to need to do it again. They're going to have difficult moments in this game. The Pumas are a sticky team, and I'm curious to see. I'm in some sense I'm relieved that we haven't really seen dialed out Australia very much at all this year. Once or twice against the All Blacks after they were put under pressure. Once or twice at the very beginning of the season, at the start of those French games, we saw dialed out Australia
15-0 down before they started playing.
Just a little bit heads out of the game, slow to react. On defense, a little disconnected, and then on offense, just not focused and not bringing the same energy that they need to bring. Like, we haven't seen that yet, and that is the in for Argentina in this game that they shouldn't be looking to give up. I'm kind of curious to see if they can sort of, obviously they're total favourites for this game. They put the Pumas to bed last week.
Wanting to go one better and get a bonus point. Yeah, exclamation marking this.
Even more than that, they just want to win, and they'll be like there's conceivable complacency in them because they'll feel like they should win this game now, knowing where they are, and that sometimes is when a team is at their most vulnerable.
Sometimes, for
so
sure.
That's just the only concern that I have is, are they going to rock up at the pitch of the game?
Once they do, I'm pretty confident that they will win it. If they do at all, and even if they don't, and the Argentinians amount a 3 or 6 point lead for all that, they probably will rally and do it. The Wallabies look a better team this year, and they will look to keep going to their strengths. Guys like Valentini and Hooper have been awesome. Keep trusting them. I'll be excited to see if Samu can get the same kind of impact that he's been having in the last quarter from the opening whistle, and I'm sure Rennie will be the same. He'll be watching that intriguingly. Line out maul is one. Rodda and Swain have got the nod this time to start. They will have a task. They will know that is one of the areas that the Argentinians will look to probably get after them. So it's a big job for those locks to try and disrupt that set piece for them. Once you do, you're a long way towards just removing all of their ins as far as scoring 5s or 7s. And as for yourselves, once you have the ball, you know who you're trusting. Like, you have experience there in Nick White and Quaid Cooper. All of a sudden, when we were talking in that French test series about McDermott and Lolosio and the inexperience therein, now you're looking at Nick White and Quaid Cooper to finish this tournament, and they're like, oh geez, there's a lot of test caps there, and James O'Connor's going to come off the bench to try and ice the game.
Exactly, and they'll know what not to do that's really senseless. I mean, they'll certainly back themselves. They'll back that wonderful centre combination to pick holes, to find spaces,
certainly
and create.
Give Karevi the ball and let things happen.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Create line breaks and run off. Karevi has been wonderful for them.
Yeah.
But the Cooper and Nick White will know not to overplay things in their own half if the Pumas are getting on top of them.
Kickable penalties. Don't need to be giving them up.
No, indeed, exactly. Just not allowing them those ins in your half, and understanding that if you can stretch them a little bit and kick a little accurately, you're going to turn them, you're going to pin them back in their own half,
gas out their big meaty
and they're just going to be a lot slower to get back into your half, and it comes in this instance with limited risk. I think they can back their defense on the evidence of last week to shut down what is sort of a very young offensive system that's only now starting to realise the need for its existence. And so just backing your defense to swallow that up and playing some territory early doors.
Probe one or two phases in the middle third, but if it's not going anywhere, kick it with no compunction, because you're probably not going to be punished for it.
You trust Nick and Quaid's boot, and you know you'll get the ball back, and then you'll find your ins from there.
Exactly. Like things like kick return, still a great thing for them.
I want to see a bit more set piece strike plays off them. Their multi-phase has been excellent, and they've found wonderful tries off it. And I just love that sort of traditional Wallabies strike move, and I'm curious to see whether they can unleash something
that
clever.
Dave Rennie strike move as well. If they can catch some of those slugs, certainly they'll be encouraged by to be honest, that Reece Hodge try that they found in terms of the way that was it Porcinti actually fell off the tackle when he was overloaded a little bit. If they can overload some of those defenders out wide, they'll be confident in their ability to ball run and carry through. And
unlike the Pumas, I think the key difference between these two sides is if the Pumas have Bruni running over Samu in the backfield, and I think that's very encouraging for them, but I'm not convinced they'll get any more than 3 points out of the play. Whereas the Wallabies will be thinking if Valentini and Hooper can get on the front foot and get past tackles, and then Karevi can get past tackles, they're going to find tries. And they do need to just be a little bit less chaotic. Like Karevi throwing 50-50s doesn't make much sense to me, because he's going to win his contact
100% of the time. You turn a 100% contact one into a 50-50 or less if the pass just goes to death.
I mean, I love the instinct. I love that they want to score on that play once they've broken the line, but actually they've been so good in the contact. Their footwork and their speed is on another
their
level.
Offensive breakdown has been good. It frustrated them last week, the fact that they couldn't get after them at breakdown time, the Argentinians this is, and if they can just be that clinical and clean again,
then you can hold the ball for a few phases, keep the tempo high, and then you will find ways in, because your offense is that good, your talent is that good.
Truly. And I think that is pretty much the recipe for the Wallabies is have faith, be patient. Don't rock up kind of still hungover from last night's premature celebrations, but as soon as you don't do that, just rock up to the pitch of the battle that you're going to be facing, and then back yourself to be the more clinical team. Even if they're close to 50-50 possession, it should still favour the Wallabies, and based on last week when they managed to get like 67% possession of the ball nearly, and it was just it was too much. They have too much for this Puma side at the moment, and they should feel confident in going after them and trusting their offence to get it done.
Absolutely. With all that said, are you convinced that the Wallabies will rack up another similar win to last week?
I did go out there with my Springbok prediction that's flying against the waves, so I think that's a little bit
that's
too
enough for
that's
you.
enough for me now in terms of going, no, the Pumas are going to win with a bonus point or something as outlandish as that. No, I think Rennie's Wallabies are going to make it 4 in a row after their 3 in a row, and are going to rock up to the Northern Hemisphere, sitting at 3rd in the world rankings rightly. And I have faith in this Wallaby project. I like watching them play. I've always liked Dave Rennie's teams. I'm a bit more frustrated with the floundering Pumas and less convinced of Ledesma, and certainly even of Cheka in terms of the offensive imprints. I want to see more from the Pumas. I would love if they got a try or 2 even this week. But I still think the Wallabies might get 4 or 5 this week. I think they will be slightly irked. They might use it as motivation, the fact that they didn't get that try. Motivation to be a little bit more accurate, perhaps, be a little bit more patient, take it through the phases. But I think the Wallabies will find the scores to get this one done. It might be a similar enough scoreline to last week's game.
Yeah, on the evidence of what we've seen so far, it's hard to see an upset here. I mean, I think don't get me wrong, I think when the World Cup rocks around, the Pumas
Argentina all together.
They will be in the mix. I think they usually manage to do that. But
the calibre of the players on the pitch are good enough to compete.
Yeah,
but what we're seeing at the minute is just not.
It's in its infancy, developing an attack. And listen, it looks like they've made the adjustment, but an upset win off the back of that and away in Australia on the last day of the tournament after they lost initially at the beginning of the tournament their two props, and then they've
lost
playing
another
in France
prop and Matera
and now a bunch of heads. It's just been really
bit
dialed out from minute one in this championship. They haven't been close to competing, and I think I'll have to look it up next week depending on how they do this week, but I can't remember a Rugby Championship since they joined it where they didn't really compete in any of the games they played.
And normally they're good for at least one tight one.
Or a win. Like they've had wins, they've had draws.
Yeah.
But unfortunately this year it hasn't gone their way, and I don't see that changing this week. I think the Wallabies are a very, very good side. I think they're proving that week on week.
They'll be good for outright second clean with that. If they win it's out of Springboks' hands.
Their visit to Twickenham in November is already looking like one of the juicier games that you're going to see all year long. I think that the contention, I think the quality of both sides,
the contempt both of them have for one another.
I'm just earmarking that as a serious game and a serious like a benchmark game in some ways for Dave Rennie as well, because he'll want to keep his momentum going heading into next year, because you're going to get that dirty Bledisloe bump at some point next year to stop some of your momentum. But if a win in Twickenham would be an absolute statement, and I know it's early days to be talking about that, but that's one that I'm earmarking for them, and this is just another step on the ladder of the journey, the exciting journey that they're going on.
100%. Rennie is the man for the Wallabies right now. He will be taking them to that World Cup, but I think first he will be taking them to a comfortable victory here against the Pumas. But that's what we think. What do you think? Do you think the Pumas have it in them to spoil the party for the Wallabies? Let us know in the comments down below if you do. Otherwise, if you're backing favourites like us, we would understand as well. But equally, let us know in the comments down below. But yeah, either way, it's going to be a great game to just kind of be the curtain raiser to that All Blacks and Springboks game, and just another double header to round up a great rugby championship, and love to see it played out in full.
Absolutely, and what a championship it has been. We will be around next week to review the championship once is over in full. We'll go through it. But for now we're gonna put it on ice until those games are played.
That's right.
And move on to some other seriously consequential games that are taking place this week. If you've been following the show at all, you'll know that we've been covering these World Cup qualifiers as they go on in the Americas. Toss and turn.
There's definitely been some things. Then the Americas ones are coming to a head over this week and next week. We've got another couple of double headers, and you have to decide by this time 2 weeks time, or in 2 weeks time, once we've played all these games, we will have decided America's 1, and we will have decided who will be duking it out for America's 2 then in the future as well.
That's right. There's two meaty, interesting games. One of which is for the ultimate carrot. One of these sides in 2 weeks' time
will have their ticket to France
into the World Cup, and then in the other game, one of the two sides will be guaranteed not going to the World Cup.
Which is losing one of these sides in 2 weeks' time as well, and everyone doesn't want to be that soldier at all, get so close and yet so far.
No, indeed. But we will start, I think, first of all with the main show, the big game for America's 1, this two-legged playoff between the USA Eagles and Los Teros of Uruguay.
That's right.
This first game is taking place this Saturday at 6 p.m. evening local time, which pushes it up to 1 a.m. Sunday morning our time in the UK, and probably 1 p.m. in the other side of the world, in Australia, New Zealand kind of land.
Which is a reasonable time if you're there with a cup of tea, you can watch a bit of footy.
Sunday afternoon down in Oz, or late night Saturday for us, or just Saturday evening if you're in the US or indeed in Uruguay watching this one. Going to be in Infinity Park in Colorado. Frank Murphy of the RFU taking the game as referee. Best of luck to him. Peter Martin, also Irish, on one of the AORs, and then Scott Green and Derek Summers, both from the US, as the second assistant and the TMO. It's going to be a serious battle. I mean, it's a real clash of styles. There's an element of unknown to it. These sides haven't played each other since 2019, and the America's Rugby Championship didn't get to take place last year. Right. And obviously the 2019 pre-World Cup is just a long time ago.
And a lot of stuff has changed since then.
Indeed. I mean, Uruguay have barely been able to put their squad together, and yet They have had some very positive results. They do have this wonderful offensive style where they move the ball really well. The US, by contrast, a bit slow. We've seen them be stung before, and yet they are extremely physical and at their best extremely efficient once they're close to the line.
Yeah,
in
very
terms of
effective
fives
from
out
five out. Yeah, their offensive maul is one of the more effective ones in Tier 2, full stop.
Correct, yeah.
And similarly, a lot of their big ball running forwards, guys like Cam Dolan, will be looking to kind of lead from the front and make it a physical game. But Los Terros are not to be underestimated. They had a win earlier this year against Argentina at 15. They did lose one last week against that Argentina 15, but they have some players back for it now as well. They managed to see off Chile in a tight one as well, which leads me to believe the other contests will be juicy as well. But everyone remembers that famous win they had in the World Cup, watershed win in the World Cup over Fiji, that created that great pool where every team got a win in it.
Yes.
So they'll be bolstered by confidence in that. They have a lot of the same personnel in there. Guys like Arata are back into the squad, bolstering them. Freitas captaining. A lot of these guys are familiar faces. And one of the things I remember from that showing in that World Cup and that game against Fiji particularly is just defensive organisation and cohesion from a Tier 2 side. I'd never seen quite the like of it, but they held their width and they tackled clean but hard. They were ferocious off the line and physical with it, even though they're quite a slight team in terms of stature, and they'll be the smaller team on the park. But they're an exciting force, and when they can dial it in and be competent and be cohesive and just be calm in that chaos, then there's scope for them to frustrate this big bullying US side, definitely. Like, there's a brittle confidence there. The US side were rocked out in Canada in the first of their two-legged affair that got them this far. So that's kind of the model for Uruguay as well. It's going to be interesting. As you say, clash of styles. Uruguay definitely the quicker team. US probably the more physical. Who's going to control that? Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, going back to that World Cup, they matched up pretty well against Fiji. They were able to do that sort of drift defense where once the line break was made, they really did cover. They covered the tracking runners really well, and just their scramble wasn't letting Fiji in, despite Fiji thinking after the line break with their support runners they should be getting in, and then they hustled really hard on the goal line. But then by contrast, they played Georgia a few days later, and Georgia managed to get on top of them at set piece with physicality.
Wrestle control of that tempo. They kept it down and kept it physical.
Exactly right. And that is exactly the kind of team that Gary Gould's US have been and are trying to be. Really efficient at set piece, strong, physical, eat you alive at the scrum, eat you alive at the line out maul, and win the game that way up front.
And the Georgians painted that picture perfectly for them in that World Cup. That is how you beat this Uruguay side, especially if you're Gary Gould's US is playing to your strengths, literally. But it remains to be seen how these two stack up, because as you say, we haven't had tape on it since before the World Cup, and that game, notably in 2019, was won comprehensively by Uruguay, and it actually scuppered a load of momentum, positive energy that US were carrying from a great season in 2018, not dissimilar to our own Irish Chargers getting whooped by England at the opening of 2019. The Uruguayans came and absolutely mugged them off in the US with a lot of razzle-dazzle rugby and high-charged offense. So that's definitely, there's scope for that to happen again as well. Like, it remains to be seen, but it's one I am intrigued about. These two sides have been playing away in the background, separate from each other, but they're finally clashing. As we kind of build it to be, it was always likely that these two were going to be coming head-to-head to face for the Americas 1 spot, and here it is.
I know, indeed. The quality of player on show is very interesting as well. I mean, they're in different positions, but there is real quality on both sides. The US have named their team. We haven't got the Uruguayan team as of yet, unfortunately. But the US have gone for Ainu'u, Toulouse player at loosehead who's been stalwart in there, Pifoletti, who is actually on the Saracens books at hooker, Taufatee now a total tight head, confirmed, starting there it seems. Loads of people, as we'll talk about Cian Healy a little later on, loads of people making that jump, and Kanye this week going from loose to tight. It's supposed to be not easy. But I suppose, sometimes you get like a right-handed guy who's thinking to himself, geez, I found myself as a loose head here and I'm pretty good, but I feel like I'm stronger when I got the right arm loose, and then I can go to work that way. But it's interesting to see the changing trends.
New tight heads,
yeah, indeed. And then obviously a lock, they've got Breakley and Savetta, who are big but need to shape up. Like Canada had ran them ragged and outworked them in that first game, which was a real concern from their point of view, and that obviously can't happen again. But on a more positive note, they have Gurmish, he's fresh off a hat-trick in that back row. Guerra's a very solid player at 7, and Cam Dolan,
he's their pack leader and spirit animal of this team really as well. He's been awesome for them all year, and he is vital to their chances. He seems to call their line-outs as well, which is completely offsetting that lock department. I'm not sure what those locks do then if he calls the line-out. But
I mean, indeed, those guys they push hard at the scrum. Their backline is not ideal because obviously Aj McGinty, who's a real difference maker for the side, missing. He failed a HIA after an illegal tackle he suffered against London Irish at the weekend. And interesting, like his last act, I think, was to convert a try. And that put them, I think, 31-13 up or something. He leaves the field, and then Sale end up drawing the game 31-all. Like he's arguably the most influential player in that Sale side, which is playing top level Premiership
footy side. So he is a huge asset to them and a major blow. It means that McGee comes in at 10 with I think is Carty covering 10 at the bench.
Correct.
Probably means a lot more will come through to Haas, which, as I've said before, I'm not convinced is a wholly good thing for them. But
he's getting a lot of positive press to Haas. Haas is another guy on the Saracens books of all places. He's obviously in his last game out. He scored a great try on the break.
Kicked a long range
drop goal, and you have the issue, and I have the issue as well. Let's be real, that he's just too slow to clear rucks.
Yes.
And that sometimes people in their evaluation of scrum halves miss the bones of the job.
Fundamental to the task at hand is how quick is his pass? How quickly can he clear a ruck? His passing has to be the first, second, third, fourth to points. And they have great scrum halves like Danny Kerr, who are really good passers, really good runners, not so good at kicking, so you just don't make him kick. Whereas De Haas is just one who sets up a million box kicks, and he's very slow and laboured and deliberate about his pace.
That kind of is this team. I mean, they will be looking to set that slow tempo. The rest of their team, just to finish it off, they've got Bryce Campbell, who's captain, and Lepetti, who's a quality player actually at 13 and could be a difference maker. They've got Cruz on one wing, Christian Dyer from the 7th circuit on the other,
and Bracky at fullback.
Bracky's
a very good player, and the last time he lined out at fullback for them, he took a knock early doors and had to go off, which was a shame because he was actually playing well. There's definitely excitement out there. It's whether they can give those kinds of will they get them involved at all, or will they just be chasing box kicks all day? That's the main issue with the US in general, because
it's not the most distributive centre partnership. And with Will McGee there in a 10, one wonders whether they're going to go wide at all or whether they're going to start to win it up front. As far as the Uruguay squad are concerned, they do have, as you point out, some of the old names. It's still somewhat up in the air as to who or what they'll go for as far as their combinations are concerned. But they will have the return, it looks like, of Santiago Arata, who, by the way, his last game for Cast, who were stuffed at the weekend without him, was a 23-all draw against Bordeaux, and he came on for Rory Cockett when they had a 10-point deficit, changed that game, scored one try, and made another, and then they ended up giving him man of the match off the bench.
He has always been a quality player, and
really
he's a big talisman for this side, so he'll come back in, no doubt, and
keep that US defence honest and try and keep the tempo frantic, and then try and also just attack space wherever it is, and he runs perfect tracking lines as well.
As Canada showed, and they'll fancy their chances of being better at it than Canada even, but they showed in that opening game against them that if you run them ragged, there's definitely chances and gaps that start to appear, and that this US team are not above appearing sluggish when the tempo gets high, and Uruguay will definitely want to do that up at Mile High Stadium in Colorado. There's scope for them to run them, gas them out early doors if they get.
It's not Mile High Stadium, is
it not Mile High? No, it's Infinity Park, but it's up. It's in Colorado, up in the Rockies, is what I mean.
Because Mile High Stadium is Denver
different.
Stadium,
that's right.
In NFL, no, it's not that.
No, it's not. But in a stadium up high at altitude, it's easy to get guys sucking diesel if you can keep the ball in play and high, like what we were highlighting with the All Blacks. If they can get large sequences, 2.5 minute sequences of kick, return, ball in play, moving it about, and then suddenly a fragmented line. Guys like Berchesi or Freitas will take a line easily, and Arata will pull those strings very well. There's a recipe here for them to find tries against a slightly lumping kind of lumbering big pack in this US team.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got Berchesi, of course, that out half who's going to return to the squad from France. I believe Kessler as well from hooker, who's a very good player and gotten the end of a few maul tries of his own. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, at the weekend against Argentina 15, they did concede a maul try, which obviously the US will be looking at, but they also generated 4 turnovers from line out mauls in terms of locking up the ball and creating a scrum. That is one of the key areas to look for in this game.
Because the US, it's their main primary weapon in terms of going for tries. They will kick the corner and look to maul you over. They did it in Twickenham at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of summer. Very impressive to see them do it in the second half in that game. But we saw the week after when they faced Ireland how if you do a bit of homework on them, or if you're a little telegraphed and the defensive team are game for it, you can scupper their chances very early by taking that set piece away from them. So Uruguay managing to do that to Argentina 15, that's encouraging for them. If they can do that here, they'll rock the US if they can't get that set piece motoring.
Absolutely, yeah, and they just want to be the more clinical team, the team that puts more points on the board.
This is it. Absolutely.
The real question is whether they're going to gel. Are they going to come in and be a little rusty? There's an unknown element to them. They're not quite as settled as they had been because they have such talent that the French sides, particularly in the Pro 2, but also in the Tucker Tours, are taking you.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, they've had great success since the World Cup, but that can be a blessing or a curse depending on how well you manage to gel the side, because they aren't going to have all those reps with each other, all those minutes with each other, all that squad bonding and understanding that you can develop over a long period as a squad. It is a little more barbarian-y, and hence the offense could either go very well with the talent they have out there or could struggle, and that's where the US can come in, and all of a sudden there's more scrums, there's more lineouts, there's more chances for the US to get on top physically. It's a great big question mark really what happens in this game. I was leaning Uruguay going into it, but I think with all that context and the limited game time that they've had in recent weeks, despite they did have those 2 games against Argentina 15, they did have the game against Chile where they were a bit stuttery by their own admission. The question is, are they going to be as good as that team in the World Cup? If they are, if they've kicked on from them, you might back them, but it's definitely up in the air out in Colorado.
It's true. They are. It's a tacit advantage that they're playing this opening leg in North America, and the same is true with Canada. In that, even if they are a little bit stuttery and finding their feet,
back to their turf.
They can bring it back to their turf, and as long as they're within touching distance, even a score or two, because they back themselves to be able to run the ball a lot. But if they can stay in striking distance, they'll feel very confident coming back to Montevideo or somewhere to play it next week. So, I don't know how it's going to play out. I expect a little bit of stutteriness, but I don't know necessarily if the US will punish them as clinically as they sometimes they're a little bit off themselves. I wonder who's going to set the tempo. I'm curious about the first scrum, whether they're going to cope with the US scrum, whether they're going to be able to repel the line out maul. I think there's a lot of really interesting little matchups here that will be telling in the end. And
there's certainly a lot of momentum coming out of South America right now.
That's
and
true.
It would be interesting. It's one of the few matchups that we're going to get to see now between South America and someone else that isn't Argentina struggling in the Rugby Championship. So I'm between 2 minds on which way it'll go, but I think I might be leaning for this one anyway. Maybe not for the tie. We'll have to see how the tie progresses. It's look, we've so little game time watched with these two sides that predictions are always way more just throwing a ballpark answer out there. But I think I'm going to say that the US at home might take this. I think the benefits of the MLR should tell in this game, but that is with the caveat that, if they're too slow and poor and can't move the ball and just end up kicking everything to Uruguay, they could get caught with their pants down very easily. There's scope for bang bang try from the Uruguay side easily enough, and we know that. I'm gonna flip that. I'm gonna say that I back Uruguay just purely because on a with that said, we haven't got as much tape, so they are just out there predictions, but the way that they play the game, they really they earned so much credit in my book for that Fiji win and creating that pool where every team got a win, which I'm just so giddy off still. They hustled pretty hard against Wales as well.
They did, they caused them problems as well. And just in terms of the rates of progression, as we were highlighting in some of the other teams as well, the US have definitely been up and down. They had a great 2018, disappointing World Cup in 2019. They're disappointingly slow in their 15s game, considering what they bring to the 7s game and what you think some of their resources are as far as just surplus to requirement sprinters. They should be a quicker team than they are. I'm a little bit more vexed with where the US are going, and they're definitely 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and kind of balancing out at kind of staying in the status quo. Whereas Uruguay have racked up some good results before the World Cup, during the World Cup, and after the World Cup, and there's evidence to suggest that there's a progression there rather than a kind of flipping and flopping or even a regression that we've seen with other teams. So I'm going to back them, and couple that with the fact that I like attacking footy. I like what South America are doing. I'm rooting for Uruguay in this one because I want Los Teros at the World Cup. I want no doubt about it. I want them in America's one, and I think they're good value for it. So I hope that they catch the US with their pants down and win the game, even on US soil.
I don't disagree. I think long term the structures that are being put in place in the USA are going to be very difficult to overcome. I think the MLR player base that they're developing is very, very exciting. But it's probably, let's be real, watching them at test level, you're feeling at the moment like Gary Gold is wasting the potential of them a little bit. They're a bit too slow, a bit too clunky. Whereas Uruguay, obviously, the limited tape isn't a fault of their own. Their recent consistent pieces of form were in 2019 when they raced through that America's Rugby Championship and swept aside all before them. And then
Fiji.
And then beat Fiji in the World Cup and looked a very, very good side in that tournament. That was a hell of a year for them. Then they didn't get we didn't get a chance to see how they kicked on because of COVID.
Yes.
That came in and stymied everything, and this is probably their first chance to come together since that World Cup. And if they're anything like that 2019 team, they'll move the ball with speed and they'll punish the US for being a little slow.
They'll be better than the US. If it goes to form in that World Cup, the US had very little in that World Cup, whereas the Uruguayans did.
So we'll see.
We'll see. That one takes place this Saturday, but it's well worth the watch. I think World Rugby might be streaming it. I'm not sure if it's going to be on their website or on their YouTube channel as they've been doing, but they are suggesting that they are to watch it live.
I saw one link, but then when they go to their website where they usually advertise it, they don't. I know that Uruguayan fans have been giving out that it's behind a subscription paywall. Which is just a hideous way to broadcast rugby in a nation that's developing its rugby fandom. I mean, it's just a gross mistreatment of the fans.
It should be live streamed on Facebook, but it
should be free to air on TV if possible, and if not possible, free to air online. 100%, because the biggest thing more than cheap profits is eyeballs on the game. That's where your long-term gains are. So that is a shame to hear that, but hopefully we have a means of watching these games, because they are going to be, this one in particular is going to be really, really juicy, and it's going to be telling. I think we're going to know a little bit more about the landscape of Tier 2 rugby once this fixture is settled.
I agree. But it is not the only fixture, for America's One is only part of the conversation, and we will now move on to the other game that's happening, which is not quite for the America's 2-1, but this is kind of a survivor game, do or die. The loser of this two-legged affair will be not going to the World Cup. Definitely no repechage, no backdoor ins. And they will be out.
And the winner guaranteed a place at least in the repechage.
So that's a carrot in and of itself. It's a huge one, to be honest. And both of these sides will be game for it. It is Canada facing Chile. Los Condores, I believe.
That's
Chile.
right.
Versus Canada. And that is going to be taking place. It is in Canada, as we said. It's the home legs are going to the North American sides for the first one. It's going to be in West Hills Stadium in Langford, and it is on Sunday, 3rd of October as well. Referee Chris Busby, also of the IRFU, a couple of Irish refs for these ones. The assistant referee Sean Gallagher, he is also Irish, so he's Gallagher.
Of course he is.
Assistant referee then Mo Chaudhry of Canada, and Chris Asmus in the TMO as well. So we have Chris with the whistle, and in the TMO, one Irishman and one Canadian there taking control of the game. It's obviously the first leg of this. It's limited how much we know. We did watch Canada in their two-legged affair against the US recently. They did very, very well in that opening game. Got blown away in that second game with much the same team, a bit discouragingly. Chile, by contrast, they earlier in the season they ran Uruguay very close, suffering a 15-10 defeat in that, I think it was in America's South America Championship that they were doing, but it was a very tight game as well, and they have progressed.
They beat Argentina 15 recently.
They did as well.
It was a huge win for them. And their momentum coming out of Chile seems all positive at the moment. They play quick, ballerific, attacking rugby. They're a little team, but it's all about speed, little attacking kicks, finding the edge, being clinical, scoring worldies of tries.
Which are their best Canada are as well. This is why this more so than a clash of styles. This could just be two quick teams who like to try and run the ball around, throwing the ball around, and if weather permits them, it could be a very open, fast-paced game on a dry track if it is at all. And then it'll just be the better team that wins on the day, the ones that can stick their passes, the ones that do manage to sit the opposition down, the ones that don't make as many errors, because there might be a few errors with a high-tempo game amongst Tier 2 sides, let's be real. But yeah, I'm just excited for this because it could take a very very exciting shape out there, both of these sides matching up with offensive intent.
Yeah, the Canadians have named their team. There's some decent talent in there. Spencer Jones, I think the boy from New Zealand who made his debut over the US games, who looked very, very exciting from 12. Peter Nelson from 10 also. They, like, when they're at their best,
they run a nice tempo and play some, they can find some nice tries.
Ross Browd, the South African scrum half as well, when they're moving the ball well and getting over the gain line, they actually look like quite a competent rugby team.
Yeah, when they can get Cooper Coates on the ball in space out there, he moves very well, and those wingers glide with him, and they run ambitious tracking lines and try and score. Yeah, at their very best, they score very pretty tries. At their worst, they give them away.
Yes, indeed. So, they can lose the head sometimes, and things can snowball on them when they're outmatched, and then they can have very little. They're not the most physically abrasive side on defense, but they do have some good players. Their captain, Lucas Rumble, he very much lives up to the name. He rumbles very nicely in possession. He carries very well. He gets them over the gain line from 6. True. And they've a few players like that. In the first game against the US, when things went their way, they were able to nick a few lineouts off them and cause chaos in that area.
They were the more sharp team around the board. They were more game to that. And if someone could bottle whatever the juju was that they had in that contest and feed it to them here, because they need a bit of that. It was an emotionally charged performance as well as an accurate one, and I think they'll need both, because Chile are not to be underestimated here. Certainly from a Canadian point of view, like there's a lot of danger out there, and they will not be keen to. We've been highlighting it before. They've actually never failed to qualify for a Rugby World Cup, Canada, which is a very impressive stat for a Tier 2 side to boast. But as we'll discuss it later on, we were watching Ireland women fail to qualify for the World Cup for the first ever time, and so precedent is absolutely no guarantee of the same result here.
No, and it hurts all that more when it happens for the first time. You're moving in an ugly direction, and it does rather suck the wind out of your sails. And when the World Cup comes round, as I'm sure will be the case with the Ireland women from an Ireland fan's point of view, and you're watching it going, oh my god, I can't believe we're not here. And that for the Canadian rugby fan would very much be the equation if they weren't to get through this game.
It's not an unfair parallel, because if we're being brutally honest about our Irish women, it's been coming. And if I'm being brutally honest about Canada, it's been coming, because their trend into the last World Cup was not so good, and I'm convinced, as I've said many a time, that they were the worst team at it, though we didn't get to decide that because they didn't get to play Namibia because of typhoons, actually, as opposed to COVID, which was, remember, way back when typhoons used to call off rugby games instead. But they were thoroughly unimpressive and uninspired in that. And to be fair to them, they have improved in the interim. Their showings in both Twickenham and Dublin, albeit in one-sided hammerings, had more glimmers of optimism, and that great performance in the opening of that 2-match series against the US was awesome as well. So there's more shoots of optimism for them here, but they'll be under no illusions about the risk here. Like, if they are to fail to beat Chile over these 2 legs and not go to the World Cup, that is a calamitous result for them.
No question. It'll be interesting to see how the game plays out from that point of view. Interestingly, Connor Keys, who was one of their players of really one of their very best players in the US game, that opening game, he's been benched, and they've gone with Corey Thomas, who was also very impressive at that game, and Kyle Bailey, who comes in. So they made a couple of changes, benched a couple of guys. It'll be interesting to see if they can do enough at set piece to disrupt the Chileans, because the Chileans look like they can hang with the very best out of South America at the moment. They hung with Uruguay. That was a tight game. They're a little worse than them, but I mean, the signs have been there all year. Their Slar side was pretty game, fared quite well against the Argentinians and the Uruguayans, all things considered, and put away the other sides. Their style of rugby very similar, and yet they're not getting blown away. They're going toe to toe. They beat Argentina 15 recently. I don't actually know their players as well, because they damned if they don't make rugby so damn hard to watch in South America.
Hard to watch only in the literal sense. Like when you're watching it, they play very pretty, eye-catching stuff.
It's gorgeous, but they just hide it. South American rugby, they hide their product from the global audience. But I mean, it's not for want of trying, but we have seen nevertheless some beautiful plays from them, and it will be lovely to get a look at them in this game and to see if they can live up to that hype, to strike at Canada, to really work that defense that isn't all that great. Try and pick them apart on the edge, be too quick for them, too accurate for them, and find load of tries and just stun them and stun the rugby world. I think they have it in them. I just on the little bit of evidence that I've seen, but I'd love to get even just reading results.
There's more of a trend with Chile trending in the right direction, as we say. They have been progressing over the last few years, where Canada, it's more debatable whether they've been progressing or regressing. It depends when you cite it from, but yeah, no, from Chile, I would hope that they will look to play their game by running it around, and they'll hope that they can just be more accurate, because if they can get into a shootout, like the Canada's offense can look pretty at times, but as I was saying, like there are as many tries for the opposition that it creates, if not more, than the pretty ones that it creates for itself. If they can apply defensive pressure and get up in the line, they should be able to shut them down and turn them over perhaps, and strike even.
So your call is Chile. I want to get to know these Chilean players, so I'm looking forward to watch this match.
No, this is it. I find it. I've seen so little of Chile that it's an out there statement to say that they're going to win in Canada in the first week. But the same thing is true of this game as it was for Uruguay. The fact that it's away from home first up means that they'll know that if they can just stay within that striking distance, even if they're score down, like a losing bonus point win, for want of a better term, is still a good result. And I think that knowledge will actually serve them well in terms of being able to play a little bit more. I'm hopeful that they might punish Canada a few times.
It's a big occasion for them. They haven't been this close now to qualifying. The qualifiers have obviously changed in terms of how it works, and they haven't been this close to direct qualification perhaps ever. So I mean, for this group of players, the pressure on them will be big. It'll be interesting to see how they cope with it.
True.
And I did see, as much as the 38-16 drubbing was a horror show from a Canadian point of view, the week prior there were some good signs. I really do like the look of that 12 Spencer Jones. I was curious, having looked him up after he made his debut, to find that he is a Kiwi.
There you go.
And it's
he had good attacking instincts.
There he is. And Peter Nelson's form is good, and it's possible that they could.
Looks good. If they can make it about that,
it's possible they could find tries. It is, but what I would say is that from Chile's point of view, holding that Uruguayan offense, which we know is better than the Canadian offense, to 15 points, does bode very well for them. So I'm between two minds in it. I've been talking about the rise of South America for so long that it seems crazy to call this one for Canada. But such is your determination to call it against Canada, I'll have to call it for Canada.
For colour's sake.
So it seems wrong for me to go for North America over South America, given what I've been talking about for the last few months. But I'll go for Canada to do this one, I'll say a little tentatively.
Okay, well, I'll say that Chile do it assertively. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments down below who you got. If you have a link to watch the game, or if you found
pop
some
that
of that,
down.
Pop that down.
Any links
at
all. I don't care where they come from, where you find them, where you dig them out. If you have a link of any kind to watch this game, by all means pop it down, because this is one that I really would love to see in full, because I'm curious to see how these two teams match up. It could be very fun. These teams could go after each other. It could be high scoring, great stuff.
Yeah, but definitely high stakes, because we know that in a couple of weeks one of them's going to be out of the World Cup. So exciting times, and the stakes are very high for these tier 2 sides.
They are indeed. The stakes were also very high in the women's qualifiers.
That's right.
There was an absolute, as we predicted, bloodbath of a qualifier between the 4 European sides playing for one place in the World Cup.
It
was a 3-week marathon in which bites were taken out of each other
lumps
at
were
every turn.
Each team, as we were kind of predicting, they were of a similar standard, all the teams involved, and
they all went to the last weekend 1-1 after a 1-win, 1 loss,
on 5 points each, so there was nothing separating them as we went into the final games.
And Italy laid down a marker in the opening game against Spain, pulling away and beating the Spaniards 34-10. Spaniards not living up to to the pre-tournament hype we'd given them. They ran out of steam after their great win against Ireland.
Yeah.
It was a tough loss against Scotland last week and blown away by this Italian team, which is about speed and skills and little else, but man, do I love it.
Yeah.
They put up a score, they got a bonus point, they laid down a marker for, according to the script, the Irish to follow. Ireland and Scotland had a game which, you know, in all likelihood was going to just be for the repechage place because of that marker laid down by the Italians.
Because of the nature of both of those teams, they're just not as high scoring or free flowing as that Italian outfit, and therefore bonus point wins are just a long way away for them.
Yes, exactly right. And Ireland didn't manage to get the dub, or probably a more generous and fair way of describing it would be Scotland did manage to get
and they
the dub.
stole the dub. They were down right towards the death, but they managed to dig it out. And yeah, to be fair to them, like, I was building them as the worst team in it by far going into it, and that was based on evidence of this year's Six Nations. They were really, really poor in that.
Yeah, they pulled it together.
They pulled it together. They managed to rally that big win against Spain, really giving them some momentum and some belief, and then they managed to nick it on an Irish team that, by our own admission and for much to our chagrin, is just a ludicrously blunt force at the minute. And when the chips are down, we're very narrow and very predictable, and kind of got what was coming to us in terms of the rate of regression rather than progression in the women's game in Ireland. And it's an unfortunate state of affairs to state. We don't deserve to go to the World Cup.
No, indeed. And listen, in the Spanish game and in this game against Scotland, they had plenty of chances to put it away. They were bigger, they were big and strong, they were on top. They could have seen the game off, and it's kind of amusing that Italy absolutely smashed Spain and Scotland, not even competitive. Ireland managed to beat Italy with their suffocating defence, beat them hollow, and yet Ireland fall to the teams that Italy absolutely pumped. Precisely because, I mean, it's a running theme, but teams that apply pressure but don't find points to marry it end up getting punished, and Ireland towards the tail end of both of those games found themselves only a score up when they could have and should have been more up, and then unable to resist the oncoming wave and ultimately succumbing to it and losing and being knocked out of the World Cup. I mean,
for the first time ever.
We thought that hosting the tournament and flopping in 2017 was as ugly as things were going to get for this team, but little do we know it was just the beginning. I mean, they're on a very, very depressing trajectory, and not for want of some talent. I mean, Bevan Parsons, one of the most exciting young players in the world, not going to be at the World Cup because her team doesn't know how to use her. It's an entirely depressing picture from Ireland's point of view. Wonderful from Scotland's, and wonderful as well from Italy's, who I wouldn't talk about. We haven't talked about enough, but they are really great. I love what they're doing.
I felt so unfun. I loved them during the Six Nations. I couldn't fathom how Wales managed to beat them and oust them to, like, they ended up lower in the table than they deserved. They play a lovely style that is just all run the ball, very little kicking. It got them into trouble against Ireland in that it was proven a little naive against that defence. But in terms of what it does for you, it's like it's as you've highlighted off camera, but it's worth mentioning is that the bonus point system is a great system, and it's there to reward teams that play the way Italy do and punish teams that play the way Ireland do. To be honest, conversely, because there was, like, going into that game with that bonus point win in the bag, they almost knew that they had that spot sewn up, because that's like the nature of Ireland and Scotland and the way they play the game. They're going to find it very hard to rack up a bonus point win against each other. They're going to end up in a scrap. Whereas Italy, to their credit, run from everywhere and try and play. And if they find a scene, two pass plays by automatic. Like, there's so many teams that are ugly to watch that end up, like, almost on reflex going one out runner. Italy are the opposite. It's a very rare play that they don't put at least two passes on.
And they pick sharp lines. Their handling is excellent. Their skill set was on another level to all the teams in this competition. They're not without their physical limitations. They might end up on the rough end of some results, but they're a growing force, and the philosophy of growing the skill set at the expense of all else.
Refuse to kick so that your passing gets good.
It is 100% the right approach for Italian rugby at this juncture in the women's game. There is a ceiling on skill sets in women's rugby that is higher than where it is now. It is still very much an amateur game, or at least in the infancy of professionalism, and the skill set is perhaps the area. Skill set and conditioning are the two areas that can explode in the game.
Truly,
it's still a young game, and I love what the Italians are doing, just leaning on skill set and being, listen, we're going to be as skilled as we can possibly be, and it's great, and they've racked up great scores,
great tries,
and if I'd say if their trajectory increases, they could be an absolute bolter in the World Cup. Who knows? They could be a dark horse.
They for sure.
They're going the right way about it.
They absolutely are, and congrats to Scotland, who after a thoroughly dismal year managed to find something and managed to scrap their way all the way to the last little survivor spot. They're the ones bloodied and bruised and going into the repechage. It's a longer route to the World Cup, but they're still in it, and you got to be in it to win it.
And they're actually going to be favourites in that repechage. Samoa, Colombia, and the runner-up from the Asia regional process will be who they're up against. So they will fancy
that.
Huge late try to knock out Ireland, because Scotland will likely find themselves in the World Cup. But man, as we said, it was a bloodying and bruising a few weeks, and very, very tough for the Irish women.
Tough viewing, all right.
But I mean, a direct consequence of the IRFU's approach to the women's game, to just invest very little in it, divest from it, and invest in the sevens game instead, on account of the Olympics. And listen, they take them from Grand Slam champions to not qualifying for the World Cup. It's been a straight line from there to here,
from success to failure very quickly.
I mean, there's not much more you can say. Well, there's plenty more you can say about it, but I mean,
I think
can't get into the weeds of the Irish
appropriate
bitching.
way to end the segment is to say congratulations to Italy, congratulations to Scotland. They end up seeing through what was a bloody and bruising few weeks in the women's game, and definitely thoroughly entertaining and captivating games. Disappointing from our point of view, but take nothing away from the winners, the ones who managed to get through, Italy and Scotland, with still some work to do, but I'm glad we'll see that Italy team at the World Cup.
100%, and Ireland were very disappointing.
We're not wrapping up with that. We're saying well done, Italy. That's
sickening from an Irish point of view. This was bad news, I think, all around. I think we can all agree. Terrible little tournament. Shouldn't have happened.
No,
it didn't have to go down that way.
It did. Yes, that is through the lens of Leinster and Ireland, which is, to be fair, that is how we try and bill it. But yeah,
that was gross. That game was, oh god.
Okay, before we are going to just move on then, because he's going to keep going.
They could just, I mean, man, if they could just be just a little bit more clinical on offense, they'd be in there. I mean, they're Bavin Parsons. I mean, more talented than anyone on any of the other teams. You could just get her the ball. Well, anyway.
In club footy next, we're going to move on and segue on. Yes, we're going
to... And another thing.
No. We're going to look at European domestic rugby, which is also underway. We're going to start with what was the news last week, was the United Rugby Championship, the IRC, or the URC, I guess.
You love your, slowly and surely, the Overlap Rugby Podcast has become ORP. And I didn't get a say in this. You just did that.
Yeah, it's just
like, this is ORP 88 now. It's like, oh, is it? Okay, whatever.
Fair enough. Acronyms are the way to go. So this
is the IRC.
The IRC.
You're irking me with your talk.
I can see that. But yes, we had week one of results in the books, and an entertaining week one it was, I thought, across the board. I thought there was some really good rugby played, and it was just great to see.
Couldn't have gone any better. I think, really, from a branding point of view. I mean, listen, I still think they have teething issues as far as their social media presence. I mean, they were talking such a big game with the whole Jay-Z thing and Rock Nation coming in to jazz it up. Parts of what they've done is jazzed up. I tell you, they've jazzed up the font.
Yes.
The font is all jazzed up for all of the teams. It's a kind of a cool little font.
Yes.
But I mean, their highlights were a week late and hence didn't get much views. Although it was good to see sort of 8-minute highlights packages.
Sure.
But they got to be on this game. They got to be like, if this is a new tournament, you want to get eyeballs on it. You got to throw out all the little the TikToks, the little videos, all the stuff. There's plenty to work with in terms of the game. There's plenty of good atmospheres,
good scores, and a lot of good moments in that week one of action. So
from a rugby point of view,
like a try of the tournament, try of the week kind of thing.
All of that, get it all up there. Do some mic'd up stuff. Take your lessons from your NFLs and your NBAs, like they said they would, and get on that. I mean, it's early days, but absolutely keep that social media presence going, because the games are very, very marketable.
Yeah, they're delivering.
What a game! Look at these. They were all close. They were all exciting games. Great results. I mean, Zebra 26, Lions 38. That was a great game. Although the Lions did race to a 35-0 lead before being pegged back. Blues and Connacht on Friday, 33-21, was a super game. Yeah. Although the Blues deservingly saw off Connacht, who managed their stock 3-try, no losing bonus point 2-score defeat for no points.
Yes.
Ulster and Glasgow played out a really fun game out in Belfast. Ulster doing their best for the fans, keeping it tight. Now every time they pulled away, they let Glasgow back in, but Glasgow kept the pace of the game really high. George Horne, I thought, looked great.
That's true.
And they scored some lovely tries.
True.
Then Benetton came back from 18-7 down on Saturday afternoon in the last 20 to come barnstorming through, and they had those poor Stormers not knowing how to deal. I mean, they just, like, every time they scored, they just exited instantly, came back in that period, and they just never stopped scoring all the way to build that lead, and they just chalked off that 18-7 lead in no time at all. Won the game in the end.
I'm loving it from Benetton. Yeah,
they're a good team. I mean, they were hampered by all kinds of problems last year between injuries in the Six Nations, and they never really got going in that Pro 14 season with the weird COVID situation that was. And then finally, when they managed to get their squad together for the Rainbow Cup, they showed us who they are. They showed us who they are, and who they are is a very, very competent team.
Yeah. And going to Benetton is one of the tougher away fixtures in this league. As we've learned to our chagrin, like Leinster struggle out there sometimes as well. It's a tough place to go, and the Stormers got an introduction to that. And their winning record against SAFA teams continues. Fair play.
And then in Dublin, Leinster 31, Bulls 3. That was awesome. Leinster 31, Bulls 3.
Gonna just say that
Leinster
once more.
31, Bulls 3. Yeah,
once more with feeling.
I was at that game. Hence, literally the reason why my voice has been croaky on this podcast. It hasn't recovered.
No, from all the shouting of joy,
salubrious
joy.
A delight to be
to
at
see
and to watch.
roaming Josh van der Fleers and Rhys Ruddocks out there. And
weren't Leinster just lovely for us? They were fantastic. I mean, it's very, very early days, and things can change in a heartbeat. But like on the evidence of this and the preseason game I went to a couple of weeks back, it's I wouldn't quite call it All Blacks levels in terms of the switch in mindset that happened in the off season this year for the All Blacks, but it does look like some very positive off-season mindset changes happened in Leinster.
You had Luke McGrath running very well. You had him passing very quickly, which is the main thing for any scrum half. You had Gary Ringrose straightening the line every time he got the ball, as opposed to drifting to the right.
Even sticking tackles, but they played with energy. They attacked from the middle third. They played a smart game, but a fast game. Yeah. The offloading was back.
Played 80 minutes. Yay.
Yeah, they had the two distributors at 10 and 12 with Frawley in there at 12. They looked to play sharp passing, attacking, offensive footy,
and
ran
the Bulls ragged. They did from the opening thing.
And old man Sexton was looking absolutely joyous out there. Tom Brady, eat your heart out. I mean, not a bother on him. He was looking great, and he's adjusted his game a little. He's sitting a little deeper. He's not taking as many contacts. A bit like Quade Cooper for Oz at the moment, but he's still running a very sharp offense on the evidence of the first two games. Like, very, very exciting about Johnny. And the Bulls, a rude awakening. I mean,
it's as tough a game as you can possibly have on week one in their defence, and they do have Springboks away. I think they will. I think I even saw enough. Like the way they arrested the momentum, like the Leinster started like a house on fire in that game, and they actually managed to jostle some control back by the end of that first half, which was encouraging from the Bulls. I saw enough from them to know that they'll cause some problems to some of these other teams in this league going forward. But it was not going to happen in the Aviva Stadium on day one. That was all Leinster, and it was great.
It was, and Cian Healy, Andrew Porter started the game at loose head, and Cian Healy came on at tight head, and both of them minced the scrum. Cian Healy's first scrum at tight head, again, supposed to be difficult to do, demolished the Bulls
awesome
scrum
to see. Yes, if he can find a new lease of life at tight head, I'm all for it. Like,
he's awesome. I don't know why. I think he's the most destructive loose head scrummager in Europe, and yet he's going to be as destructive at tight head, and is Porter going to become a loose head? And I don't know what the long term plan is. All I know is that the versatility of the guys is exciting. So very, very high on Leinster as of the weekend. Edinburgh beat Scarlets 26-22, another close game. Likewise, Ospreys beating Dragons 27-23, and then the other game on the Saturday, Munster, 2 tries from Simon Zebo, and as they
to open and close the game. Got the opening try and the last try, and he added to he was already the highest try scorer in Munster history. He's just added.
There you go.
And he's saying, Andy Farrell, look at me, here I am back in town.
He wasn't picked for that 50-man squad, and I can see why. He probably doesn't have the pace to play winger at test level, but as a versatile option, he would be someone that you might consider.
True. Keep scoring tries, all more power to him.
42-17 win for Munster over the Sharks, who did manage to keep Munster at bay for a little longer than the Bulls managed to keep Leinster at bay, and to find some tries, as you say. So in that sense, a more positive performance from them. But like as He's been off in the way with the Sharks.
Going to the Aviva Stadium was very tough. Going to Thomond Park on day one also very tough, very tough. And they weren't up for it. Munster looked good at times. Some of their play was quite nice. Snyman back was an encouraging moment.
After the year from hell, delighted for him. Let's have some games.
Yeah, no, he made it longer than he did in his debut as well. He was mentioning that, but encouraging signs for Munster and South African fans as well. It's just good to see that big ranging man back on the pitch.
He's an undiscussed weapon in the Test circuit, but if he can get some games together and find the top of his form, be right back into that Springbok side and an absolute menace for anyone to deal with. RG Snyman. Positive for Munster. But that was week one of the URC. There are more games this week, as there will be in many weekends to come. Connacht taking on the Bulls in Galway in what's likely to be a rainy match is going to be an interesting one. I'm following the South African sides with interest. The only side to win last week have to go to Canethley and play the Scarlets, which is obviously a tough game for them.
It was a fun little social media bit of some of those lads trying to pronounce Canethley. Yes, that's quite fun.
Didn't do too bad a job.
No. To be fair, the Scarlets are well known. They've beaten the All Blacks before. It's like
the struggling Stormers and all their off-field problems are off to Thomond Park themselves. That'll be a tough game.
That's going to be a tough one.
And the Sharks are off to Glasgow to play them, and that'll be a good little benchmark game.
True. Yeah, no, I remember at Glasgow, one of their SAFAs on the books, I can't remember who, was citing the 4G pitch as something that the SAFAs probably won't be that used to, because they just don't exist as much in South Africa. Probably because you don't need them, because the turf is plenty dry and plenty bouncy. But so it's just more new experiences for these South African sides. As you say, they are the intrigue in this early going, and between things like 4G pitches in Glasgow or Thomond Park raucous crowds, there's a lot of kind of new exposures to them.
I don't buy the 4G pitch as that big a factor. I mean,
the bounce of the ball is a little higher.
The ball bounces higher at altitude anyway, so it's not like they're not going to be used to it. It's anything, it's just going to make the conditions a little more home-like. The bigger problem is the sports grounds in Galway for the Bulls. That's going to be new. It might play to their strengths in that it brings about a lot of scrums, a lot of line-outs, a lot of dead play.
They are probably a bigger, more strong side than Connacht.
But it's not what they usually deal with.
That's the
wind and the rain.
Yeah, it's that's the location of that bizarre Felipe Contepomi conversion from yesteryear, where he kicked it through and it just blew back out through the post.
And where it'll probably throw them is when they've the wind behind them.
Yeah,
that'll throw them more. They'll try and they'll kick it dead. They'll do all that back on their own
in their own in goal.
Exactly. They'll have no clue how to deal. That'll be a fun game. All right, to see how they cope with that, but the 4G pitch will just that won't be an issue.
It just means it's a quick game. Glasgow will look to keep the tempo high as they did in that Ulster game in week one, and we could have a bit of a humdinger there. That would be fun.
Curious to see what the Sharks do out in Glasgow. Proper challenge for them and a proper benchmark as well. Might be the case that the SAFA sides take a while to bed in, but exciting debut for the URC, and looking forward to seeing how that one progresses. The Top Coutures still rumbles on. Good few rounds in now. The pick of last week's games was Racing pipping Lyon. Lyon did get the losing bonus point, but that was a 24-20 win for the hosts in Paris.
That's right.
There were a few other surprising defeats. Biarritz got absolutely tonked by La Rochelle, so Rogers La Rochelle off the mark. Montpellier fell away to Pau. Cast fell badly to Stade Francais. That was a bit of a shock.
They did, Stade haven't looked so poor at the beginning of the game, the season. And Perpignan edging Toulon in a game I was watching, and it was like a low-scoring, wet scrap. 12-9 it ended up. And to be fair, I watched only the first 50 minutes of it, but it was on late at night, so I went to bed. But I was looking at it, thinking it was 6-6 when I went up, and I was thinking Perpignan are looking like they're edging this, and sure enough they did. 3 more scores came in the game, and 2 of them were for Perpignan. It was an absolute it was a mess of a game, to be honest, but Perpignan were slightly the better, and Toulon were all kinds of loose and dropping all kinds of balls, and they got punished for it. So all teams off the mark. We're not going to have what we were highlighting last year with poor Agen on 2 points perpetually and finishing on 2 points. All the teams are now off the mark, so we have already surpassed that, and Agen I think are actually struggling in the Top Coutures now. I don't know what the story is behind the scenes there, but they were
there is a story. Someone can tell the story.
There's probably a story behind the scenes, but we're not going to have a Top Coutures season like that this year.
We have
competitive teams.
We have the crowds back, and we have an old traditional Top Coutures. 7 games, 7 home wins. The winning sides really were the ones who managed to get the losing bonus point away from home, because that's the real edge.
That's true.
To be fair, the one team booking that trend has been Toulouse. They just happened to be at home this week against Clermont and saw off that game very well with a nice Dupont try and Ntamak on the board again.
Yes, Ntamak keeps scoring in every games. 4 rounds in, and I'm pretty sure he scored in every one of them. And he looks very good. And Dupont with that game icing try peeling down the short side. The running game that we know he possesses, and finding a floundering Clermont wanting at the death was always the way that game was going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 7 home wins last week. This week, fear for the away sides. Brive will beat Stade Francais at home. Lyon will beat Bordeaux at home. Perpignan will beat Pau at home. Montpellier will probably do for La Rochelle at home. Biarritz, Toulouse will book the trend and win away. They'll be the team to do that before Toulon lose to Castres. And Racing might slip up away at Clermont just on account of how home sides reign in the top couture, and that is the way it goes.
That is usually the case. Of those, I'm looking at Montpellier La Rochelle could be a fun game.
Clermont Racing will be easy on the eye.
Clermont Racing will definitely be easy on the eye. And to be honest, Biarritz Toulouse could be fun, because Biarritz have started this season very, very well and playing a nice brand.
59-point drubbing they had at the weekend.
Well, they managed to catch a bullish La Rochelle, who were just apoplectic
and needing a win.
0-3, having been in the and 2 finals last year. It was not something they were looking, and Biarritz were on the receiving end of that tonking, unfortunately for them. But now they have to face Toulouse at home. That's a much easier game. Ugh.
Yeah, maybe this is the rough patch in Biarritz this season, but the top couture is ongoing. Week 2 of the Premiership took place last week, and we got to see some very interesting narratives break out. Leicester got a big win over Gloucester at Kingsholm, perhaps unsurprisingly. Wasps tonked Bristol 44 points to 8, and Bristol starting
in that La Rochelle spirit of going 0-2. They have very comprehensively gone 0-2. I think they only scored, it was 8 points this week? Was it 9 against Sarries in week 1?
It wasn't much, alright.
Like, for such a high flying offensive team, Pat Lamb's Chargers have really not got out of the blocks yet.
No, and they haven't had their main men in, and it's been a little clunky. I mean, I've been surprised at how seamlessly over the past couple of years they've been able to transition players in and out and maintain the high level of performance.
Maybe it's catching up this year.
Good defenses are going to fancy it when they're not picking their number 1 guys, and if they're for a team that looks to go wide, at the moment there's a lot of good defenses out there, and certainly Saracens last week would loved eating them alive, and Wasps did it with an exclamation mark by putting up 44 themselves. And then the shock of the week, really, well, perhaps not as shocking as all that, but Northampton going out to Sandy Park and nicking a win against Exeter.
Exeter starting poorly as well. They're 0-2 as well, 26-24. And that was a surprise. And another away win actually was Newcastle 20, Bath 13. So unlike the top couture, away wins
these games played in better spirit.
Yeah, sure, indeed, they can come. And then actually the other game on Saturday was Harlequins 35, Worcester 29. Losing bonus point for Worcester there. Harlequins getting a nice win in the books. But the interesting thing about that game was Sarah Cox made history as the first woman to referee a Premiership match. Congratulations to her, and actually, many more records like that to be set. I hope to see one in the URC in a wee while.
Yeah, it's not just one. Like, it's not tokenism.
Holly Davidson's very good as well. Yes. She should be reffing games.
She 100% should be. And Joy Neville, she's absolute trailblazer, and you respect the hell out of her. I kind of think she's a bit of an iffy ref. I would put her in that Pro 14 tier of dodgy refs who can annoy. Yeah. Whereas Sarah Cox, everything I've seen of her in all the women's games she's taken, I think she's a great ref. I think she's a really excellent communicator. I think she sees the game very well. Yeah. I think she's talented, and the game needs that right now. And really, just broadly speaking, as well as just her being a trailblazer and being the first woman to referee a Premiership match, absolutely congratulations to her. Not soon enough, and hopefully the first of many. But even just on a broader point, the talent pool coming out of English rugby is very encouraging. The refs coming out of there are, at the moment, the best communicators, the most consistent at the breakdown, the most consistent at rewarding players at the scrum. Sure. They see the game very well, and they're fair-minded, and so huge respect to what's going on in the English refereeing development pool, because they're producing some serious talent. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's rare enough that you give refs the shout out in a positive light, and this is definitely a case for that. So Sarah Cox making history there. And the other game from last weekend was a fun one on Sunday. The only game on Sunday was the Sharks won 31 something or other before they completely
capitulated and drew 31-all.
They're constantly at that.
They are at
gassing
that.
themselves out with their energy defence that never stops. They run themselves ragged and then concede towards the end.
The last quarter gets very tight and very hairy. And London Irish, bolstered by a timely introduction of Sean O'Brien off the bench to Barnstorm.
He was looking like old school Shawnee out there.
Sitting guys down and roaming in the open space. I
was half watching it and then I saw, there's Shawnee going on. Go on, Shawnee, because I'm just used to him in recent years, seeing him on one leg trying to hustle, getting the odd jackal steal, and then just to see him on the ball going, whoa, that's the Sean O'Brien I know and love, and he was out there doing all kinds of chaos, and fair play to him. I mean, I thought his career was done a few years back.
Not alone, like Leinster did let him go, and he was a little chagrined at it, but he's definitely proven a point in off the bench and making serious impact, because they came roaring back as soon as he was injected into the game. They just came storming back, and once Adge went off for Sale, they seemed powerless to control the game, and then they gassed a little bit, as you say, and London Irish managed to put some good sequences together and nick a draw there, albeit it was at home, London Irish, so they'll be kind of questioning why they were so far down in the first place at a home game, but managing to dig that out, and a 31-all draw. The game is obviously in disrepute. We need to tear up the playbook and stuff. It's too many
change
defenses.
the rules.
And
listen, for obvious reasons, I also did enjoy the missed Paddy Jackson chance to win the game.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, way to trade your morals for a guy whose clutch is like off the scale bad.
Yeah,
but good luck to you, London Irish.
No, it's true. Declan Kidney was even talking about why have the IRFU not reached out to us, and maybe that's why.
That's the reason. There's no two ways about it. That's the reason.
Yeah,
you can't touch him with a 10-foot pole.
It's true.
But anyway, that was that, and credit to London Irish for that comeback in all seriousness. Next week we have some fun games, but the pick of them, if you're going to watch one next week, Leicester v Saracens. That is like an early season absolute.
Welford
benchmark of a game.
Sarri's back in town. Bad.
Leicester feel like they're back. They really do. They look positive. Their team looks stacked with talent. They look together as a unit. They're putting together some big wins.
Their
football team is kind of poor again. I mean, it just life feels a bit more normal in Leicester. And that's true. This is going to be fun. I think this whole season's going to be fun. I think it's been missing Leicester.
It has.
Leicester bring an edge and an atmosphere to the Premiership.
Proper European pedigree as well. They are a great historic club, and Welford Road is one of the great locations for any rugby game, and it is just great to have a competent Tigers side again. And look, sure, the big bad and Sarri's coming to town is what more could you want as far as colour for it?
It's made for
an exciting game.
3:00 on Saturday,
afternoon game. There are a few of them kicking off at 3:00 actually. There's Worcester Gloucester and Newcastle Wasp, but what are you doing if you're watching those games? slap on Leicester v Saracens.
That'll be fun. And to be fair, the Sunday game between Sale, Sharks and Exeter has bags of potential as well.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. Bristol Bath on Friday as well is the only Friday game. Bristol desperate for a win. Bath losing at home last week. Both of those sides will be desperate to try and get something going. And this week it's actually Harlequins who have the bye, so we won't be seeing the Premiership champs in action this week either.
Yes, indeed. But good. The bye is definitely a fun introduction. And we also had the Rugby Europe Super Cup, I should say, which carried on its second round. Two of the games went as per the script. The Lusitanos of Portugal, having beaten the Iberians of Spain at home, went to Spain and won away as well.
20 points to 13. Portugal's supremacy over Spain remains at the club level.
Well, what a turnaround. I mean, it's all about Portugal now. Spain playing catch up against their Iberian rivals, and that was a heck of a win from the Lusitanos. And they're the team that's going viral with the funnest tries. So good on them.
We just love Portuguese rugby. We love it here on this podcast, and I think
everyone
loves it. Should.
It's hard not to love.
It's exactly what the Wallabies love to see as well. They're running the ball from everywhere.
Portuguese rugby in a healthy place. And then in the Russian derby, NSI STM won by a bigger margin away from home against Lokomotiv, which is telling. They're flexing. They're obviously a team with a bit of history and will probably fancy winning this tournament.
They'll be looking to try and win this tournament, but there are still a few unknown quantities as well. Tel Aviv Heat and Black Lion didn't play as
Tel Aviv Heat keep acquiring very interesting talent.
They do
from all over, and they'll be interesting to see how they gel. And Georgia have a lot of that Georgian squad. Basically everyone who hasn't been picked up by
Top Couture's
teams is in this squad. So from that point of view, there's definitely scope for intriguing matches. The other game that happened this week was that the Brussels Devils turned around their defeat to Delta of the Netherlands, and while this may be a matchup of stragglers in this competition, it was fun to see them trade results.
Trade blows. They both have a win on the board. 27-21 that was this time. So both the Netherlands and the Brussels Brussels team getting underway in terms of points on the board. And
the
next
Brussels
match,
team is called Delta, by the way, which is just a terrible name in the context of everything that's going on at the moment.
Yes, that is true.
Oh, yeah, Delta, really?
Not very marketable.
Yeah.
Hashtag no. But yeah, the next match or the next round of matches will take place on October 16th. Actually, that's only one game. That it'll be the Black Lion and Tel Aviv. Those two teams that are yet to
I'm
get
definitely
underway.
going to watch that one.
That's going to be on its own. And then all round 3 matches are going to be scheduled from the weekend of 23rd and 24th of October. Yeah, awesome to have this tournament underway with 2 rounds of results already in the books. It's already got a bit of legs. And
the matchups will change, the dynamics will change. You'll have more clashes of styles. I feel like this opening round was the teams that are similar in style. You know, your 2 Russian teams, Portugal and Spanish team, and Netherlands and Belgian team. It's all very neat and paired.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is the matchups, and hopefully the games can stay as competitive and that there isn't sort of a massive discrepancy in talent.
We won't know until we see those of new matchups when those 2 different styles of teams come together. But that's going to come in the coming weeks and months. And good to see this tournament underway and getting moving. Then there was other news in the sevens as well. We had the Edmonton Sevens, another Canadian leg in this one, and a few talking points. The Blitzboks were once again dominant and victorious in the men's game, and they do look the best team in it as well by quite a margin. Our own charges were very disappointing, losing out to, I think, who did we lose in the 7th-8th playoff? It might have been Hong Kong. Yeah, ending up with 8th despite bolstering the squad with a few
brought
guys.
in Jordan Conroy
and then didn't give him the ball.
Yeah, didn't give him the ball. Yeah. I mean, geez, the parallels between the sevens team and the women's team at the moment.
To carry on,
get your talented winger on the ball. Stop driving me crazy by giving honestly,
they take a million contacts before they give Conroy the ball.
The wrong players are on the ball too often, and the right players are on it too little.
Yes.
It does my head in. Anyway,
we weren't a factor. We were 8th, so we need to stop talking about
Ireland. It's disgusting. The Blitzboks are the story of this competition, and now everyone's getting a little antsy because they want to see the Blitzboks take on Fiji and New Zealand and the like, because they are so much better than all the other teams in this competition. They look awesome, head and shoulders.
And I still remember our opening fixture in the Olympics was the Blitzboks absolutely disassembling the Irish team like a flat pack from IKEA, and just absolutely writing the book on how to beat us, which was quite discouraging to watch but impressive as well. But they do look the best side in it. The more exciting stuff actually came in the women's game in the Fast Four this time around, I thought, because Jazz Joyce is just a joy to watch for Team GB. GB were triumphant in that Fast Four competition again, but Jazz Joyce has scored 34
23 tries in 2 tournaments. Incredible.
She's just to get cut above everyone else on the pitch out there. It's quite impressive to watch from the women's games point of view. Yeah. She's just a star.
She has been the best player in the tournament for the last 2 tournaments. She's been outstanding, breathtakingly good, looks on another plane to anyone else on the field. Defensively incredible, offensively incredible. The heroic plays, like Brian O'Driscoll levels of supremacy on a rugby pitch. And very disappointingly isn't going to feature from here on, because England have reinstated their sevens programme and are set to replace GB on the circuit, and Wales have yet to do so, and she's obviously a Welsh player, and she's taken to social media basically posting a picture of herself with her multiple Man of the Match awards and all this, saying, I think she says, I'll quote her anyway just to get it right, she says, "I wish I could have the opportunity to win more of these on the World Sevens circuit. I love being part of Great Britain and being involved with world class players, but also playing against the top teams in the world. These dreams aren't going to last forever, as Great Britain will no longer be on the circuit post the Dubai legs in December, and this will go back to being England. I will enjoy going back to play for Wales, but unfortunately I will no longer be a full-time rugby player and will be balancing both a full-time job and playing rugby, which I'm not ready to go back to doing just yet." And so she's basically saying, if I can't be sorted out and get a professional contract, I'm done. And that is for arguably the best player in the world, your sport is not in a healthy place if you can't entice the best player in the world to stick with you. She
looks it right now. She definitely
gee whiz. I mean, the Welsh Rugby Union, I know they're in a tough spot financially, but if there's anybody in the world you need to be paying, it's her. And this is the issue. I mean, they're playing Sophie's Choice with a lot of their stuff, but not fielding a female sevens team when the potential of them is pretty close to limitless.
You have a calibre of player like this, and there's the Olympic card at the end of it all. If you can,
but then that's GB, and that's the thing. It's they don't have that carrot in Welsh Rugby Union, and hence they put it on the back burner. But man, oh man, if someone could give them a dig out, even if I was like involved in English rugby and understanding the value that she'd bring to your team GB come Olympic time, to be conversations that you could have, and basically the powers that
women or something need to give her a contract.
The powers that be need to come together and find a resolution to this problem that doesn't involve Jazz Joyce giving up the game, because man, what a shame that would be from a fan's point of view.
I just love watching her. She's been exciting
on another plane,
100%. But that was the main story. The Edmonton Sevens wrapped up. The Blitzboks look like they are dominating this current thing. So yeah, Team GB not quite up at the races. Kenya not able to live with their big brother. There's a bit of a gulf in standard. It's still funny watching the Jamaicans throw the ball around sometimes.
They're trying. They're figuring it out.
They are figuring it
out. By the end, they'll know what the rules are.
That's true. But the 7 series does roll on, and that is just
Germany.
Great to see.
Germany
were
GB.
the story.
We should mention Germany.
We were overlooking because Germany actually very nearly took a win off Ireland in the thing. They were unlucky to lose that game, and then they beat Team GB. They look competent to the Germans. Don't be writing off the Germans.
They stunned the US in their playoff. It was either the US or Canada. I think it was the US. They stunned them in a playoff for 5th place.
Yeah,
like they were class. Yeah. The Germans were class and very exciting. Didn't even play last week and rocked up this week. Efficient. Everything you'd expect from a German rugby team. You'd have a picture in your mind of the sort of frame of a big German rugby player, and looking at sort of their national psyche in other sports, you'd be like, man, if they ever got into rugby, they could definitely be good at this game. And that was an indication of it at the weekend. I'd love to see a good German rugby team. I think they have the physique for it, and perhaps the temperament as well.
I would agree. And they showed a touch of class in Edmonton at the weekend. So the 7 series, as we were billing last week, it's just good to have it back underway again, and good to see some of these games taking place. And they have been up online as well, so you can go up and find them on YouTube if you want, and you can always watch them in retrospect too. They're just good 14-minute things that are exciting moments.
Bite-sized rugby and constant entertainment, action-packed class.
Just don't support Ireland though, because your heart will be broken.
But sure, is that not true in all parts of
indeed.
Not in
rugby? Not in Leinster Blue. They booked the trend.
Not yet. I mean, whiz. I mean, wait till the business end of Europe. I mean, we might have a higher bar for heartbreak, but it does come nonetheless.
It does. It's true.
Anyway, with all that said, we're going to move on to the rugby news of the week, which we always wrap up the show with. We have a bit more Irish heartbreak to kick off the news. Our autumn test, which was the Las Vegas Cup between Ireland and
the Death Star.
Ireland and the US were set to play in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, which for those who don't know is a really cool new stadium that is hosting all kinds of events over there. It's a crazy looking yoke, nicknamed the Death Star, like all black on the outside, massive big building in the middle of the Vegas kind of strip. And indoors, unbelievable surface quality. Just looks to be like as top drawer as a new stadium comes, with all of the bells and whistles that go with it. I think the Las Vegas Raiders have been playing there in the NFL, and it's just a really, really cool ground. And I was buzzing to see Ireland do it. And I know if this game had happened, and to be fair, like this test has been cancelled for COVID reasons. There's restrictions to do with people from Ireland travelling to the US, and basically they're just saying that it doesn't make sense at this juncture, which for me seems a little crazy given both countries are as vaccinated as they're going to get.
Yes, that's true.
But they have said that they're basically putting the plans on ice. They're not killing them, but
they want to try and rearrange it for October 2022.
That's it. Yeah. So
if they can do that, then I'll be okay. We will blow up the Death Star in October 2022, and I'll be okay. I'll be able to live with that. I don't know who it'll be. Who's going to be cast in the Luke Skywalker role? Jordan Larmour coming in with a woohoo. I don't know, something exciting, but that is definitely the colour.
I know that Vegas would do a good job with an event like this if given the chance, and maybe you could tag on a game between the Maori and the US as they have done in the past. Well, actually, that was what they did when Ireland played New Zealand. I mean, sometimes the Ireland-US thing can be a bit of a mismatch, but if you could put maybe an All Blacks game in there as well, juice it up a little bit, get 4 teams in there. And I just, that the powers that be in Vegas would turn it into a well-marketed event, would fill that stadium, would find a way to get people in there. Like, they're so good at that.
They are.
And it's just, it feels like a missed opportunity, because it could have been just a class occasion.
Yeah, you could have had Floyd Mayweather and the like in there.
Yeah, you could have had anything. Like, it's Vegas.
It is Vegas.
The possibilities were endless. So we'll put it on ice for now. It's unfortunate it's not happening this year after they got me all excited.
Yeah, that's true.
But
so we have to rein in that excitement. But in other news, news, the former Highlanders and Leicester Tigers head coach Aaron Mauger.
Major.
Is it Major?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Will coach Moana Pacifica. So Moana Pacifica have announced their coach. He's going to be head coach in their historic debut campaign in Super Rugby Pacific in 2022. He's Samoan. He is actually of Samoan, Tahitian and Cook Islands descent. And he's inked a 3-year deal with Moana Pacifica, signalling the new franchise's clear intention to attract and retain Pacifica talent. He's also, he is, by his own calibre, he's a 45 cap test
Major
All
was
Black.
a quality player back in his day for
like
the All Blacks.
He's no mug there. He's going to be a good head in there for them, and it's just good to see a player of that, or a former player of that calibre, and a thinker on the game, putting pen to paper and committing to Moana Pacifica. Very encouraging. For
Exactly
Islander
right.
rugby.
It's a slow build of a project,
It
but
is.
they are really throwing the book at it this year. They've gotten some good talent in from a brains trust point of view and from a player point of view. And Super Rugby is a ways off just yet, but they're going all the right ways about making themselves as competitive as they can reasonably be expected to be for a new franchise entering a competition with some of the best club sides in the world.
True.
It's a heck of a challenge, but I'm excited already that they're throwing the book at it, and I think they'll likely have some scalps in them come season time. I doubt they'll be totally impotent.
I hope so. And for Pacific Islander rugby sake, I hope so. There was kind of what have you got? One other thing I was
No, go on.
There's one slight different kind of take on tier 2, but mainly Pacific rugby in general. Tonga have had a few blows dealt to them. They were scheduled to play a Scotland match that's actually outside of the test window, and with COVID restrictions, meaning that a lot of certainly the COVID restrictions in their own home tags mean a lot of Tonga-based players probably won't be available. They'll probably be leaning on their European-based players, who the franchises or the clubs there having no obligation to release them. And then they got the blow of the news the other day that Malachi Fekitoa, who was set to make his debut for them, possibly in that game, has undergone surgery on an injured shoulder and will not be available for their autumn series at all. So it's actually been a few blows to Tonga in sequence that is quite unfortunate.
Indeed. This is going to be one of those tough tours for Tonga. They're well used to it given what happened to them over the summer. But
sure.
They're probably... I think the Tier 2 Rugby blog on Twitter was flagging it that they could struggle to even field the 23.
Genuinely could struggle to field 23. And their coach Kefu is still undergoing or still recovering following that horrible assault on him over the summer. That was horrendous news. And you can, a couple of the head coach will probably not be going. All their home based players will not be available. Presumably lots of their European club based players will not be released to play. Hopefully some of the kind of more charitable natures of some of the clubs will see them release some of their players and be able to field a team, but it seems like a bit of a naive match to put together, to be honest.
I don't really know about the scheduling. Scotland have been great for giving games to Tier 2 teams. I don't know
going
if
out
this
to
is
Tbilisi and the like and all that. But
I think there's value to it, but one thing can't think that this is good for anything except maybe the Scottish or Rugby Union for getting some bums on seats to see the Scots play.
A confident win for Scotland, hooray! But it's a tough one to kind of wrap your head around, especially with all this background. And it would have been a nice time to see Malachi Fekitoa kid out this autumn, but that's not going to happen either. So just a couple of bad news stories for Tonga.
Indeed, and we're going to look also, there's another story just coming out of Super Rugby. The Chiefs, who obviously were Aotearoa finalists in the year just gone, have moved Warren Gatland from returning head coach into a new director of rugby position, which is interesting, and last year's head coach Clayton McMillan will maintain his role as head coach.
Pretty undeniable stuff from McMillan. He's probably just kind of made himself undeniable by his sheer credentials. So going from 0-8 to finalists is pretty good turnaround.
I was curious what they were going to do, because obviously they had Gatland. He was coming back. He's got all the pedigree, etc. And yet his style of rugby is so not conducive to what the Chiefs do.
Yeah, it's antithetical to what the Chiefs do.
I think South Africa Rugby magazine ran this story with the headline, Chiefs relieve Gatland of coaching duties, which was a hell of a way to put it. Another way to put it would be Chiefs promote Gatland, but it
does feel like
the machinations of these director of rugby positions versus head coaches are always intriguing, and I think they differ depending on what club you're in. But it probably does feel a little bit like they're just putting them to one side and maybe telling them, maybe look at some macro pictures. It's not even an area of expertise. I mean, I think Gatland likes coaching.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see if this ends well at all, or if this is just like a stepping stone to Gatland moving on from the Chiefs. It's hard to know. Maybe he wants a break in a director of rugby position, a new role which is a little more broad based and less week to week will suit him fine, and he'll be back home.
Sure.
But Clayton McMillan keeping
earned
on
his
with
right,
the
earned his jersey,
on-field
you know, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Yeah, no, he's been very impressive, and the Chiefs' season last year was a joy to watch in terms of their turnaround. And to be fair, Gatland's Chiefs were abysmal to watch and had no success. So it
they weren't
sense.
right. Like exactly, like he's the kind of guy who would toss Damien McKenzie out of the team because he doesn't suit his style and replace him with a clunky big guy from somewhere. Like he's very single-minded in what he wants out of his teams, and it just doesn't gel with the Chiefs' approach.
No, the Chiefs who have had Dave Rennie, Juju in their veins even since the man left, they know how to run the ball from everywhere and not necessarily be playing that style.
You'd be delighted to know that I've snuck in another story from Irish women's rugby in this.
Love that.
Yeah, just so I can have a rant. But this was an interesting one just from Bantry Bay Rugby Club, who basically put out a social media post talking about the state of women's rugby in Ireland at the moment. And one of the key areas that they were citing was that there's just this bizarre difference in rules at the moment, where if a team shows up with fewer than 15 players,
13 or 11 or something,
exactly,
rocks up with not enough to play.
The women's games or the girls' games aren't allowed to happen at all, whereas the lads' games can in all contexts. You can trade players, you can go ahead for 12 aside
or 12 aside.
Yeah, you can do whatever, just rock up and play games. And then, whereas in both under 18s and over 18s, women's and girls' rugbies, this isn't being permitted at all, and the regulations are just to
not play the game, walk over
match.
Victory.
Yeah, and their frustration was basically, I think their squad had been shy a few players a few weeks, and then they were chatting to the lads team on the other end, and the lads had been short players as well, but they were able to play games, and the women's team were basically being strictly not able to play games when this happened, and they were just venting their frustration at that, and started going a little bit broader and just saying that women in Ireland aren't encouraged to play rugby so much. And I flagged this as well just because there was an interview off the back of it, 42 had it, with this youth coach Patrick O'Connor, whose quotes ring true. Basically he was talking about speaking to Munster coaches and coaches at sort of a higher senior level. This is his quote. He says, "From speaking to the coaches at Munster, one thing they've always said to me is a lot of the time the girls' skill levels are not where they expected to be, and I'd argue that that's because the rules aren't in place. If girls aren't being taught at an under 16 level how to lift in lineouts, then she goes into under 18 and she's expected just to be able to do it. When everyone has gotten bigger and stronger, that's more dangerous than teaching the skill at a younger level, and the same is true in the scrum. There's a huge difference between someone who's 18 years of age and 15 years of age, so surely it's better to teach them good technique when they're 15 and get them used to that contact and feeling that sort of kind of pressure in the scrum, rather than waiting to step up to the under 18 levels." And this is sort of a tacit sexism that's going on, and it's not just a thing in Irish rugby, but with the women's game and the girls' game, is that the lads in charge and the powers that be go, "Oh, I don't know about young girls doing lifting and lineouts or doing scrums. It just doesn't feel right." And hence, if some people slag off the women's game for not having the same levels of skill that the men's game have, I don't argue that it does. It doesn't right now. But as this guy points out, the reasons for this are because it's just not being developed. And I think you're seeing with the likes of Italy and, of course, New Zealand and England, that there's just the ceiling on the game, and the skill set and the professionalism of the game is exactly as high as you want it to be.
And with putting up barriers at underage level in terms of developing those skills, or putting up roadblocks like, "Oh, you're a small club out in the middle of nowhere and you've only managed to rustle up 11 players to play this game. No game for you. Home you go."
Like so much of what we're doing in the women's game, it makes my head explode at the moment. It's just not right. It's kind of sexist. It's stupid. And it's killing us. I mean, it's just killing us. It's resulted
in us not making the World Cup for the first time. It all comes up and blows up in your face if you wanted to, and they have set it up to do so.
There's lessons to be learned. I mean, developing the skill set of the girls' game, one would think would be a high priority for them.
But also just equality. It was always a thing, and it seems to have shifted and regressed. And that was one of the things Bantry were saying, was like, it used to be to the great credit that women can have a go at rugby the same as the men, and there's a women's game there and a men's game.
And it's the same rules.
It was fostered, it was the same rules. It was fostered well in Ireland, such that they managed to garner a team, even in an amateur status, to go toe to toe with the best in the world. And through our own action, through divestment, through investment in the women's sevens game, through all of these like arbitrary rules at lower age levels that have been introduced, we've actively harmed the game rather than fostered what was a very good ethos for it and very good tradition in it, and that is just unequivocally a terrible blight on the
As
RFU.
if the bad news doesn't keep coming, Claire Malloy, who is an absolute Ireland legend, and to be fair, a legend of the women's rugby game,
awesome,
like
awesome
even
player.
in like she had Grand Slam successes and all kinds of successes in Ireland jersey, and in her later career was serving a more Parise-like role of being just a world-class player in a very not world-class team.
Yes.
But Claire Malloy, out of this world player, she announced her retirement officially from the game.
Kudos to Claire Malloy.
Awesome player.
Thank you, Claire. She is a legend.
Congratulations on a phenomenal career. She was awesome and just ahead of her time, because she was a true pro in every sense of the word, despite working in a hospital in Wales towards the latter end of her career. She was
flying
still
back over for trainings and doing her own drills and circuits over in Wales. Yeah, she's a phenomenon.
If there was any justice, she'd have a retirement package waiting for her from her career, but it's just been a selfless service she's given, and congratulations to her on a heck of a career. But listen, I think we can put to bed all of the talk about the Irish women's game, because it is just depressing.
True.
There was just another bit of news on the women's game, is that World Rugby have provided a bit of detail on this annual rugby competition, which we talked about a little earlier in the year, involving Canada and the USA. This is also going to include New Zealand and Australia, and has been dubbed the Pacific Four. So basically they're ring fencing England out of the competition because they're too damn good, and they're going to play, basically this competition is going to take place every year, and it's going to begin I believe next year.
The Black Ferns aren't too good, are they?
Well, the England at the moment are insane.
That's true.
Like I genuinely think they are probably the best team in the world, but we obviously haven't seen that game enough of times. And there's no doubt that the Black Ferns will be up there, if not the best, whenever things come around.
Sure.
But it's going to be it's definitely fun to see this function as a rival competition to the Six Nations and give these teams an annual competition to go by.
That doesn't have to compete directly with the Six Nations, which is another facile or silly thing about scheduling. But a completely separate competition and a new look. And I think it will. Well, is it going to double as a qualifier for the World XV as well, that Pacific tournament, which is the World XV thing, is what they were also building up in terms of a new system for playing the women's game and trying to make it its own product that stands on its own 2 feet, that isn't kind of chaperoned by the men's game.
It'll be curious to see how that looks. Obviously we talked about that a few weeks back, but that'll be,
I think it's a more like things like global calendar is a facile argument in the men's game, because you have things like institutions like the Six Nations that are pretty immovable in the time of year that they are, and seasonal impasses that are tough to navigate when you're dealing with hemispheres apart in terms of games. But in the women's game, it actually makes a bit more sense to be more tenable in terms of a global calendar, because there are just fewer teams playing.
There are a limited number of top quality teams, and hence to get top quality matchups you need to all be on the same page regardless of what hemisphere you're on. There's definitely truth to that. That one will begin in 2023, and it'll be interesting to see the women's game take shape
from thereafter. Obviously we still have a World Cup to play between now and then, but exciting times for women's rugby elsewhere in pastures greener for it.
Indeed. And finally, the last story we have today is just an interesting one coming out of South Africa, which is that this row in the background between Western Province and South Africa Rugby has escalated to crazy levels. South Africa Rugby is now believed to be putting measures in place to ensure there can be no legal challenges should a decision be taken to place the Western Province Union under administration.
Receivership.
But this is the latest in a behind-the-scenes boardroom saga, which involves the Western Province president Zelt Marais, who's been under all kinds of pressure to leave. He was facing a vote of no confidence, but it didn't take place because he was arguing over the technicalities that allowed the vote of no confidence to take place. Refused to see the minutes of a meeting that demanded his no confidence.
His vote of no confidence. Maybe you should just go over and be a Republican in the States and just kind of filibuster up there in Congress. Crazy levels of waffle going on here.
He seemed to do a filibuster job on it, but the union is at loggerheads with him, and he seems to think he's immovable, but the likelihood is that he'll move on. But basically the issue is that the union has been badly financially mismanaged, and there are serious issues basically been brought to its knees financially, the Western Province, and that's evidenced certainly from the outside, from the fans' point of view, just looking at the player exodus from the place. I mean, it's like, don't leave the lights on once you've gone out.
Exodus, and they lost a serious amount of weaponry in terms of Khaleesi went out, and then there was the floodgates were open, and Peterborough was just exodus.
A few years back in Peter Steff, it's all gone.
They had a mighty team a few years ago, and they have all just eroded away. So it's a tough spot for them. I don't know how quickly if we'll see any results of this on the pitch. They obviously still have fixtures to fulfil in the URC, and they will fulfil them, and they have field teams. But behind the scenes, it's looking likely that South African rugby might end up seizing control of them in terms of assets and trying to manage them back out.
Yeah, and there's a bit of detail on what that would look like. Basically, they would have to suspend all funding to the union, then suspend the union as a member of South Africa Rugby, then they'll have to remove all of the governance structures and appoint an administrator who would ensure the day-to-day running of the union goes smoothly, and the decisions are made in the best interests of it. And develop a business rescue plan if needed. So this is very much a union in crisis, and it's hard to know what state they'll be in when they come out of it, or if they come out of it, or whether the Cheetahs players should keep sharp and keep training.
Yeah, this is the other thought, is that the Cheetahs just rock up and in, and the Stormers are brewing. But obviously disappointing for Western Province fans, and just not a good state of affairs. Obviously, COVID has been tough on everyone. We know the situation in South Africa is tumultuous as well, but it does seem like a bit of mismanagement from the top within the organisation.
Whoever this Maurice fella isn't coming out of it smelling roses
very cleanly at all, but it's obviously tough times for the Stormers, and hopefully they can manage to rescue that situation. I think without any more ado, I think that is it. I have no more news to show. That is our show for this week. If you've made it this far, thanks very much. We appreciate you for it. But we will be back next week to look back on the games from this weekend, review the Rugby Championship as a whole, as well as touch base with those World Cup qualifiers, which will be one leg in, and we'll be looking forward to the next leg. But as you said, we're going to probably take a wee break after next week's show and be back for then the autumn internationals too. So keep an eye out for that. As is always the case, like down below, share the video with your rugby loving friends, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment if you have anything to say. Drop it down below.
Leave all comments, all thoughts you have on the show, anything you have to say, by all means, pop it down in the comments below, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But up until then, we'll see you next week, and for one last show before we put the show on ice for only a wee bit. I mean, the autumn internationals start towards the end of this month, so I mean it'll only be a couple of weeks. That you'll be missing us, but we will see you next week anyway for a full review of the Rugby Championship, and until then, it's bye
guys, see you.
That was always a little lie for whatever reason.
Hey,
ooh,
got the side one
out the window.
Yeah.